All right, good evening and welcome to Motley Crude, episode 11. Motley Crude, your favorite Warhammer the Old World podcast. I'm Kevin. This week I'm joined by my regular favorite hobby buddies in Andrew. How you doing, man?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing great, doing great. And what about you, Ryan? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty awesome right now. How about you, Kevin?
Um, pretty sick. Pretty sick. My son brought back some Nurgle's plague from daycare. So between coughing my lungs out, the only other job I've had is ensuring that the toddler does not cough on the newborn, which is basically in and of itself like a full-time job. But other than that, I'm I'm doing great. Um, so this evening, we are going to be talking about the Empire's Arcane Journal. We're going to be dividing this one into two parts. So we're going to be talking tonight everything knightly orders, and then on our next episode, we'll be talking about the city-state of Null. So before we get into the Arcane Journal talk, let's start with a bit of what's new in everybody's hobby. Let's kick it off with Ryan this week.
So I'm still just been building my Wolves of the Sea, which has been fun. And I did get a game in on Warhol the other day with said Wolves of the Sea against my friends Night Goblins. That was a good time. And other than that, I rediscovered the BattleTech PC game, and I've just been playing that a lot.
Nice. How did your game go on Warhol?
So I lost by virtue of my giant chaos spawn getting murdered by 55 poison arrows, and by Frindal having to be sacrificed to the archer block in order to get other things into combat with it.
Sure. Yeah, I guess the like a bunch of ballistic shooting is kind of the paper to the rock that is the gigantic chaos spawn.
Especially when it's poison. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a rough matchup for it for sure. What about you, Andrew? How's your hobby been?
I haven't had much free time, but when I have sort of snuck away to my painting place, I'm working on a bunch of pieces of Necromunda terrain that I've kind of built over the past year, but kind of always put aside to focus on minis. So I'm just doing this batch. I got maybe like 4 or 5 kind of big sort of centerpiece pieces for the tables that I've kind of like made thinking that's cool. And now I'm just kind of pounding them out right quick, get some airbrush work done on them.
Nice. Have you guys transitioned to the third part of your campaign in Hive Secundus yet, or?
No, we kind of delayed that because everyone was kind of busy once December hit. So we're gonna start the third phase, like the second week of January. Just let everyone get through like the Christmas and the holidays and stuff. And then another guy actually, he's starting a new campaign, in like I think it was March or April. So like right when our Secundus campaign ends, there'll be like a new one starting right after. So it's just
nice.
Non-stop Necromunda.
It's good. It's good stuff. On my end, not too much has happened. So I, from a painting perspective, not much. I have my hands full right now, but that should hopefully pick up over the next week. I'm done work, obviously, for the holiday break, and then after that, I'm going into some parental leave. So I'll have hopefully plenty of time to paint. That being said, I did play a game this week. I had some wolf on wolf action. I played my Wolves of the Sea against some White Wolves knightly order, and that was a really fun game. It was two always be charging glass hammery type armies into each other, so that was very interesting. And I really like the spoiler alert. I really like the Order of the White Wolf. We'll get to that in detail later, but I think I think there's definite play there. It's narrative, it's cool, and it was a fun game for sure. So yeah, that's it for my hobby this week. Not a massive update. But moving on to some news now. So we got first things first in terms of the news. We got a preview this week for Harold or Harold, if you're German, the Grand Master of the Order of the Knights Panther. But I don't think we'll even talk about it here because that article was made completely irrelevant by the entire the entire Arcane Journal leaking. So we're just going to save that guy for later. And we did get a leak today. If you guys haven't seen it online, you can find it on Reddit of Cecil or Cecil, the Worm Slayer, the Bretonian named character from their Arcane Journal. So that hadn't been released yet. So let's start with Ryan as our resident Bretonian expert. How are you feeling about the model?
I mean, all things considered, it looks exactly like I expected it to, which I know there's a whole raft of people that are disappointed in that, but like the head, shoulders, headpiece, helmet look like the artwork in the book. But he's literally nothing that I didn't already just build out of the plastic Foot Knights kit. So I have no intention of actually buying him.
Sure. Yeah. I think he'll fit in super well with the Foot Knights. He's like, he actually, just like you mentioned, looks like one of them.
Yep.
All right, Andrew, what are your thoughts on the Worm Slayer?
I fucking hate it. He looks so like skinny and kind of weak, and maybe
Okay.
it's just the picture that leaked, but like he doesn't look very heroic compared to like some of the other characters we're seeing, like the ones that just came out for Empire.
Yeah,
And even
sure.
compared to like the other Foot Knight kit that Bretonian got at the beginning of the game release, like he kind of reminds me of that other character for Bretonia, the one with the janky face that they're like, yeah, we just found him kind of in one of
In
the
a drawer.
warehouses
Yeah.
in a drawer. Yeah,
Duke
it
Flipper
kind of
Hands.
yeah, it
Exactly.
kind of gives me that vibe in terms of like how kind of underwhelming he is.
Well,
I don't know.
I think he's better than that guy. That guy was pretty.
I mean, yeah, his like proportions are better than that guy, but it's the same kind of like, well, he still kind of looks janky.
Sure.
Like it looks like he was sculpted like 20 years ago.
Fair. Yeah, I don't like. I'm underwhelmed. He's okay. He's all right. Like I'm happy that he exists, but I don't have a ton to say about him. I think that is a character you could perfectly easily convert yourself as Ryan did. Slap an axe on somebody in the Foot Knights kit, and you're halfway there. Frankly,
It comes with axes.
okay, there you go. So you're good to go then.
Well, that's kind of the other thing
And
too.
a
Is like
dragon
it's a
helmet.
little too late.
Oh, it also
Like
comes with a
anyone,
dragon helmet?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay. So
Yeah,
you're
like
set.
literally
anyone who plays
everyone.
Bretonia.
Sorry,
Sorry, go
Andrew, what was
ahead,
that?
Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Oh no,
feels
I
like
was
a
gonna
little
say if
too late.
everyone
All right, I'll
keep
shut up.
going.
Nope.
No, keep going. Sorry.
Bretonian's released last January, yeah. So it's like you've waited almost a full year for this character. Anyone who's like hardcore into Bretonia and wants to run this guy has already either converted him or 3D printed him or has something already. So like it's kind of too late for this model to come out, it feels. Because it's like, well, anyone who wanted him already has like a facsimile of him.
Yeah, I agree. I guess because he's a little bit underwhelming, it's certainly not worth waiting a year to put this guy out. But who knows? I think, yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with you on that one, Andrew. It's a bit late to the party. Okay. So it's been a few weeks since we highlighted some of the upcoming events that are happening in our neck of the woods. Ryan, you wanna give us the scoop on some of the stuff that's coming up in the new year?
So disappointingly, not a whole heck of a lot here in Ottawa, or mainly it just hasn't been scheduled yet. So the next event on the calendar within the greater region is actually Grand Clash in Three Rivers. Eh. I'm just gonna trip over that. You could say it. You could say it there, Kevin.
Yeah. So yeah, the
But yeah,
Grand Clash in Trois-Rivières.
there we go. So yeah, 7 to 9 February. That's a thing. And really the next thing on the calendar after that is Canhammer team tournament. I'm sure we will fill in the time between now and then with some smaller events, but there just currently isn't anything on the docket.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going. At least I'm going to try my best to go to the Grand Clash. So I read online this week that it's the largest tabletop sort of wargaming convention in Canada. So yeah, that seems pretty cool. I wasn't aware of that at all. Unfortunately, I've never been to the event, so I'd really like to go this year. There is real life, however, but like I have a secret plan to bring my family to my parents or my wife's parents, which live like an hour away from where the tournament's happening, and then try to scoot away for the weekend and go play there. We'll see how that goes. But that's currently my intent for sure. I'd love to be able to get a GT in nice and early in the year. And from people who've gone in the past for Old World or other events, I've only heard like good things about it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to trying to get there. You guys think? Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
No, I was gonna say there's a chance I might be able to go, but it's I have to relook at the schedule for what I'm doing for work over the next couple months. But
Sure.
it might work out. But at the same time, it's anyway.
Yeah.
I won't go into
Sure.
rabbit holes about my
No.
opinions about choices made about the event. It's one of those like I don't really enjoy reframing the entirety of how I played the game just to suit a specific event's proclivities.
Sure. Yeah, I can understand that. I guess for our listeners, if you're thinking of maybe attending, there's like if you'd like to do a doubles event, I know that they have like a doubles event on the Friday, and then they've got like the GT, and then they've got a sort of, I don't know, narrative event on the Sunday. So there should be something for most people out there. So anyways, that's the plug for that event. And then after that, it's for us anyways, the march down to CHTT, which I'm really looking forward to. I've got my team squared away, actually. So we haven't talked about it much, but I know who I'm going to be playing with, so that'll be fun for sure.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. So let's talk about the Arcane Journal, the new Empire Arcane Journal, the talk of the town as it is. So before we sort of kick off and we start to dive in sort of into the nitty gritty detail, let's just go through our overall thoughts on the journal itself. Like, do you guys like what it's bringing to the table? Do you think it's on par with the other Arcane journals that have been published so far? And then from your perspective, is it like a hit or a miss overall? And then let's kick off with Andrew this time.
I like it. It brings a lot of cool sort of different ways for Empire to play. In terms of power level, like I think it's kind of middle of the road. Like it's definitely no like Orcs and Goblins or Tomb Kings with their crazy mortuary card shenanigans, but like it does give Empire like a fairly nice boost in power with some cool like thematic units and things like that. So I think it's pretty nice. And I think as you look at our review, at least for the current Army of Infamy, we're going to go through it. It's almost like 6 or 7 different armies, depending on which knightly order you take. It kind of shapes the way your whole army goes. So I really like that aspect about it, because it kind of like, depending on how you want to play your army, there's a way in there for you, or at least like, I guess, that certain things you want to be good at. If that makes sense. So yeah, I like the book. Yeah, there's not much else to say.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. In general, when you're talking about the power level, I think the difference between this one and some of the others is that you're still building off an army, which is, the Empire. But yeah, Ryan, what are your thoughts about it?
So I'm very much like I actually really love it. As I was saying to Andrew earlier, is I had negative interest in Empire as a faction. until I saw this, and I'm actually more interested in the other army. But anyway, it's the Arcane Journal just lets you really like dig into theme, both in the Grand Army and in these two armies of infamy, which is really really cool. Um, and but at the same time, like I do also note, like from a competitive standpoint, it doesn't actually fix or address anything, but also to kind of counteract the online discourse around this, the Arcane Journal's points, or like the purpose of the Arcane Journals, is not to adjust the competitiveness of a faction, it's to give them thematic options to play the game. Unfortunately, some thematic options have been aggressively more competitive than others. Um, but that's like not, no one at Games Workshop is sitting there going, you know what? A Knightly Orders army will make, this faction better from a winning games perspective. They're looking at it from a, you know, does this let people engage with the, creativity of this setting better?
Yeah, I think Ryan, a lot of your comments I'm gonna echo here. So I really like the journal overall. I'm going to say I think it's my favorite journal of all the ones that have been published so far, including Warriors of Chaos, where sort of half of the armies of, well, one out of the two armies of infamy were pretty half baked. So I really like the Empire Journal, not because, as you mentioned, it fixes Empire, but because it gives you a lot of cool thematic sort of ways to play the army in sort of different in different archetypes, which is amazing. Ryan, you hinted at it, but you sent me this meme which about people who are upset about the Arcane Journal online, which was like the goal is not to balance Empire through the Arcane Journal, it's to broaden the scope of what you could do with the army, and I'm 100% there, and I think the design studio has totally nailed that. So I'm super positive about it. There's like incredible amounts of theme in here. You guys mentioned it. There's like almost like 6 armies in there rather than 2 when you count the 5 knightly orders, which is super cool. This is how the Oops All Cav armies of infamy should have been done in other books, frankly. And I guess I'm also 100% in line with you, Ryan, in that I have never, in all the time I was playing and looking at the old world, considered having an Empire army. However, with the cool, flavorful ways that they sort of brought for us to play within this book, I've already played one game with the Knightly Orders practice game, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm a literal hair's breadth away from pulling the trigger and just making some really poor life financial hobby decisions. So yeah, I think that's a big success on my part, on their part. Sorry. And then in
Use all
terms of
those Bretonians you have in your basement.
yeah, I have exactly. I'm buying basically every army at this point. And then I guess from a competitive standpoint, I still think the most competitive way to play Empire, which is sort of a theme for all the Arcane Journals that we're talking about, remains the Grand Army with some bolted on parts of the new book in it. However, I really do think that both the city state of Nuln as well as the Knightly Orders have some competitive play. Like you probably won't win, CCBB with a straight up Knightly Order. That being said, I really believe after having just played the one game there into my competitive Warriors of Chaos lists that you could go 4-1 or 3-2 with some of the, certainly 3-2 at a GT with these armies of infamy. And I mean that should basically be the bar where you're setting things, right? Where if you can run away with a positive record piloting this army, then it should be good enough for most players, I think, as far as I'm concerned. So I said a ton of stuff there. Like, any thoughts on that, guys?
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Okay.
there's some good stuff in here, and like you said, I think it's not like the worst, and like what Ryan said, it's still a modification to an already has not army, which is the Empire. But it does give them a good little kick that will make them compete maybe a little bit better. Although at the same time, like I was saying to Ryan before we started the podcast, there's a local player, Frank, who runs sort of like an all cav with demi griffs and steam tanks with some artillery support. And like I feel like he does like fairly well, but I feel like this book doesn't really help his list much. And it's kind of like, well, in my mind, that's sort of like the good Empire list is Frank's. And I don't know like if this is a bump in power level for him or if it just kind of he ignores it and continues to make his own.
So I think it's definitely a bump in power level for Frank. Shout out to Frank there. Because so he can either do two things now. He's got like a great painted Empire army. He can pivot either the way of going full on knightly orders and then just have a ton more army lists to play with, or he can bring some of those some of those orders into his grand army list and make all those knights and demigriffs, I don't know, Knights of the White Wolf or Knights of More or whatever, and then just give himself a few more rules to play with in his grand army and definitely increase the power level, because there's no doubt in my mind that let's call them marked or the order marked knights are better than the generic variety.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree with that.
In any case, he's lost nothing, right? And even if he picks up is like 2 or 3 items, he's still a winner.
He's a winner in our hearts, buddy.
Shout out to Frank. All right, perfect. So how we're going to be covering this sort of review of the Army of Infamy is we'll be doing this in 3 segments. We'll be talking firstly about the knightly orders in general, so army composition, rules and stuff, and then we'll be covering the 5 individual orders. After that, we'll be looking at the 2 new unit entries that fit very well with the knightly orders. That's the Grand Master of the Knights Panther, as well as the Tutagen Guard. And then finally, we'll be looking at the magic items. So without further ado, let's talk about army composition. So we've already really talked about this in the intro comments, but just Andrew, before we kick off here in earnest, do you like or the play style that it brings to the Empire, the Oops All Cav list being different than just a crappier Bretonia, which we've talked about in the past on this podcast? Or what else are you thinking about when it comes to the knightly orders that you haven't already covered?
Depending on who your leader is, I feel it's kind of restrictive on, say, like the generic list, just because, as I guess we'll get into it, or Ryan will cover it, like you're locked out of certain choices because it's the Oops All Cav. So one of the big ones that I notice is you don't have innate access to wizards unless you go a certain route with your orders. And I feel like that's a very big thing to not be able to just innately take in your army. Same with one of Empire's like greatest strengths, which is the Great Cannon, and to some extent the Hellblaster too. Like not being able to pick those items for your cav list, I feel like it's support options that an all cav list needs. So I'm a little worried about that, but I think like with the options you do have, and there are ways to unlock those pieces into the army, it kind of mitigates that a bit. But like just the base generic Army of Infamy list, I don't know. It seems very restrictive. Is that kind of the answer you're looking for here? Like that's kind of my feeling on it.
Yeah, I agree. We'll talk about it in detail later, but for sure it comes packed with a lot of restrictions. But I'll let Ryan go before I sort of dive into that.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, I generally agree that it's very restrictive, but I also think part of that restriction is the fact that each knightly order also like adds stuff in different ways. So like it looks more restrictive than it actually is, but your order definitely shapes a lot of your choices. Like I know when we first started talking about this, I immediately just went to more because you can still have a wizard and all these other things. But yeah, no, it shapes everything and it is very restrictive, but the restriction I think is part of the theme. So while it may detract from, a certain degree of competitiveness, it also like the idea of what these knightly orders are based on in the real world, just like showing up, dragging some cannons behind them is doesn't jive. So it I like the way they did it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I think the restrictions are a future, not a bug on this one, for sure. And I think they really play into the theme. And then if you still want to bring Hellblasters, for instance, then you can always go Grand Army and bring in a knightly order with you. I guess my main sort of takeaway on this point, or the thing that I'd like to sort of voice here right now, is that we've talked about it on this podcast, as I mentioned earlier, in that previously the Empire cavalry list was basically just worst Bretonians, and when Ryan and I think myself were trying to write lists for Empire, we'd end up with worst Bretonians. But my sort of key thought on this Army of Infamy is that I no longer have that feeling. I feel like it's an entirely different play style, or well, it's still like an all cavalry army, of course, but it brings different tools and different things to the table that you don't see in Bretonians, and it certainly doesn't feel, or when I played the Knights of the White Wolf, there, it didn't feel like I was playing gimped Bretonians, the army, right? It felt like its own thing, and it felt well designed, and I appreciate it for at least on that front. So again, all positive for me. Okay, so let's just keep moving here on in terms of how the Army of Infamy is structured. So we've already touched on it in detail. So before Ryan sort of kicks off and reads off what the Army of Infamy composition list is like, the way that this army works basically is you will select the Army of Infamy, of course, and then you'll pick one of 5 knightly orders to be your sort of the thing that you must mark, for lack of a better word, all of your knights, demigryphs, inner circle knights, grandmasters, and masters with, and then that becomes sort of your go-to order, and really defines what the list ends up looking like. And that's really the only sort of rule that is common to the 5 different knightly orders. So yeah, that's how it works. Let's go over to Ryan now to just talk about sort of the composition list and then give us his thoughts on it.
Okay, so the army has up to 50% characters. You can take 0 to 1 Grandmaster. You must take at least 1 Chapter Master. You can take 0 to 1 Lector of Sigmar or High Priest of Ulrich per 1,000 points. That's one that definitely gets modified by which order you are. You may take Witch Hunters, Priests of Sigmar, and Priests of Ulrich, and you can take 0 to 1 War Altar as a mount for your potential Lector of Sigmar. You must take at least 25% core, which includes 0 to 1 unit of Inner Circle Knights, and 1+ unit of Empire Knights per 1,000 points, and Empire Archers. You may take up to 50% of your army's points as special, which includes Inner Circle Knights, Demigryphs, and 0 to 1 unit of Empire State Troops or State Missile Troops per 1,000 points. And you can take 25% of your army as rare, and the rare slot is only Pistoliers. There is no points allocation for allies or mercenaries in this army. And if you take a Battle Standard Bearer, it can be a Chapter Master for plus 25 points. So overall, it's very focused on the cavalry. It's just very cavalry. What I do really appreciate is that they didn't do something silly like they did with Errantry Crusade and Heralds of Darkness. Like, you only have to take 25% core, not 33% core. And having to take 1+ unit of Empire Knights is way better than having to take 1+ unit of Knights Errant. So, but like at the end of the day, it kind of walks you on. You're gonna have a unit of Inner Circle and Core, and probably 2 units of, and you're gonna have 2 units of Empire Knights. You're gonna take your Chapter Master. You're probably also gonna take a Grandmaster, and then Spice.
And that spice is Demigryph Knights.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, Andrew, what's your thoughts on the army composition?
It's definitely a lot less bad than the Heralds of Darkness. It kind of seems weird to me. I guess, before in like some of the past armies of Infamy, they played around with some of the percentages. But as far as I can tell, this is just straight up like the general percentage allocations for armies. So I don't know. I think that's good in its own way, but like it would have been interesting to see maybe like more rare allocation or like a different core allocation. But the stuff you get in here is kind of stuff you would already want to take anyway. Also, I'm looking at the wrong one. There we go. But yeah, like it just seems kind of straightforward, and really like all the flair you get out of the army list comes from depending on what order you get. So this kind of just makes sense that it doesn't have too many changes to what you would normally take. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I kind of agree with you, Andrew. Like on my end, I think there's two big things that are sort of left out here that you would want out of the Grand Army, and that's surprise to nobody. Wizards is the first one. Losing magic support really forces you to rethink of how you play your army, certainly, and then you must come up with an alternate plan if you're intending to play this army in any way, shape, or form competitively to deal with magic for sure. And then the second big thing that you sort of lose out on is artillery. So if you're looking at the Empire army list in general, once you factor out Demigryph Knights, Inner Circle Knights, and then Artillery and Wizards, there's not much left that's really good. Steam Tank maybe. So, not being able to take those certainly really modifies the list in pretty massive ways. On the positive side, though, having Inner Circle Knights in core is incredible. I wish I could have something similar in some of the other armies I play. That would be really sick. They're actually a very decent unit, and it really doesn't feel when you're building this army list out. It doesn't feel like you have a core tax per se, because you want to take knights in smaller unit sizes, and you for sure want to take Inner Circle Knights. So I'm really there for it. I think this Army of Infamy probably has one of the better core selections of any Army of Infamy out there. Perhaps Wolves of the Sea is better, but aside from that, it's really no, probably not better, but maybe on an equal footing. It's a really good core selection. So overall, I really like the army list, and removing things for flavor is positive, I think, in this case. Any additional thoughts on this one, guys?
No.
No, I think we covered it.
Okay, perfect. Let's kick off with some of the nightly orders. So, Andrew, I'll turn to you to give us sort of the rundown on what the Knights Panther do.
Okay, so if you decide to make your army follow the order of the Knights Panther, an army of the Knights Panther can include 0 to 1 units of Empire Knights or Inner Circle Knights belonging to the Order of the White Wolf as a mercenary choice. And they are not subject to the misbehaving mercenaries rule. If you give, I guess, the mark or whatever, the Order of the Knights Panther to a unit, they must be armed with lances. Although if they can purchase magic items, they can take those as well. And they get like low special abilities. So the first one is they can reroll a single dice roll of a natural 1 when making a charge roll, before discarding any dice that are required to be discarded. That's pretty cool. They also gain Hatred, Warriors of Chaos, Beastmen Bray Herds, and Demonic models. So that's a cheeky way to keep Demons of Chaos relevant in the game. In addition, Grandmasters, Chapter Masters, or a unit of Inner Circle Knights that also are part of the Order of the Knights Panther, they gain Magic Resistance 1. That's pretty cool because it kind of helps you get around the fact that you're not going to be able to access wizards if your army is for the Order of the Knights Panther. This one kind of just seems like the general, like the vanilla version of like Knightly Orders to me. Like they got some cool stuff. Being able to take those Order of the White Wolf guys as mercenaries is nice because it gets you sort of two ways to bring in different orders into this one list. Although that's not a huge unlocking. Again, it'd be nice to have some sort of anti-magic better than just Magic Resistance 1. But yeah, that's basically it for that order. Nothing too crazy.
Sure. I agree with you, Andrew, there. I think they're really the middle of the road knightly order for sure. The touching on some of the rules that you highlighted there, being able to bring a unit of white wolves is cool and thematic. There's like a lore aspect to some sort of alliance between the two orders there, which is nice. That they thought of it. I guess if you want to run Knights of the White Wolf, though, you probably just want to run that knightly order, but whatever. Aside from that, I mean, the lances, you must be armed with lances, for me is a bit of like a non-rule because frankly, you were taking lances on most of your knight units regardless. So great there. I think there's real value in the re-rolling ones to charge, and that thing is going to save your butt in games for sure. When you've got a 12-inch charge to pull off with your knights, and then you roll a pair of ones, and you're staring down the barrel of getting charged in return and losing a really chunky unit, or at least a big part of a chunky unit. So I think that's just straight value on the re-rolling ones. It's not flashy, but it'll definitely come in handy pretty often. In terms of the Magic Resist 1, I mean, yeah, fine. If Magic Resist was stacking, it would be better, I guess, because we'll get to it later, but in this Army of Infamy, there's an extremely common item that gives you Magic Resist 2, which is pretty cheap for what you're getting out of it. So it's, for me, that rule is kind of superseded by that item existing. So yeah, really middle of the pack for me on Knights Panther. I'm not super hot on them generally. What about you, Ryan?
If I was going to call anything knockoff Bretonians, it would be the Knights Panther, because like you're paying extra points to just get finest war horses and hatred some specific armies.
Yeah, agreed.
That's what they do. But yeah, like you're right. They are the, like, I think these are the like the perfect template though of like, if you were to just make a knightly order, Knights Panther is like the default one. At the same time, like, they could be kind of a neat option actually in like a grand army. Like you take a unit of Inner Circle Knights Panther and have fun with it. But
yeah, and then you're just getting more reliable charges basically, and then hatred into a bunch of matches. So it's good.
Does that one also apply to the Swift Stride roll, or is it just your base charge roll?
it does not, because the Swift Stride is a modifier to the charge roll. It's not the charge roll.
Gotcha.
Like the charge roll is defined as the roll of 2d6.
Yep, makes sense.
But at the same time, Empire also has a 15-point magic item that lets you re-roll the Swift Stride die.
Neat. Okay.
Yeah. So if you stack those two on a big brick of Inner Circle Knights, that's pretty.
You're charging stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Makes them a lot more reliable for sure. And then I think like the hatred, Ryan, I didn't really talk about, but like I think it's solid. I mean, Warriors of Chaos are a common army in the meta, and overall, and you're going to run into them. And then, woe betide anybody who's facing your army and you've got full hatred rerolls. Definitely makes it a bit more of an uphill battle. Also helpful, obviously, into demons, which you won't see many of, frankly, and then beastmen, who you'll see marginally more of. So, that's just also pretty decent. Okay, rolling over to the Knights of the White Wolf. Personally, my favorite order for a lot of the theme and the stuff that it brings along. It's also one of the more expensive ones. When I was leading off on this segment here, I didn't mention that you need to pay to upgrade your knights to be of a specific order. So you're talking 3 points for model for Knights of the White Wolf versus 2, for instance, for the Knights Panther before them. So White Wolf is one of the more expensive orders. For sure, but I think you're definitely getting your money's worth out of it. So, what you get for the Knights of the White Wolf, firstly, you get to bring any number of Tutagen Guard as special choices. Tutagen Guard are a great unit. However, I think they've got more of a place in the Grand Army than they do in this Army of Infamy, and I'll delve into that a lot more when we get to the actual unit itself. But let it be said that this knightly order lets you bring Tutagen Guard in special, so there's that. It then lets you bring 1 unit of Free Company Militia as a core choice per 1,000 points. I'd be shocked if you wanted to take these. In fact, just go ahead and don't take them because they're not very good. And then it also limits, in terms of army construction, you can't take obviously lectors or priests of Sigmar because you're an Ulrich-themed army, of course, and you can't take witch hunters because they're also quite associated with Sigmar. What you're getting, however, with the Order of the White Wolf on the positive side, I think is pretty good. So, firstly, if your units are equipped, well, they must be equipped with great weapons and halberds, and then you can replace those with wolf hammers. So, wolf hammers is a new weapon that comes with the Tutagen Guard. Basically, I think this is a very good weapon. Like I've played it in that practice game I did, and I think the Wolfhammer is sort of the secret sauce for the Order of the White Wolf. There, at base value, it gives you strength +1, AP -2, requires 2 hands, but it's not strike lasts, right? So it's like a halberd with an extra pip of AP, basically. And then, however, if you do get a charge off with this weapon and you move more than 3 inches, you're getting a +2 strength modifier. So basically, it becomes a lance on the charge. However, you're not reduced to using basically a hand weapon when you are charged. So it's actually a really good weapon, and having it for free, I think, really adds a lot of combat power to this army specifically. And then the other thing that you get, pardon me here, I got a bit of a crying baby situation. But the other thing that you get here is you get the Furious Charge special rule with this army, which applies to all of your knights, obviously. And then Furious Charge is fantastic because you just get basically an extra attack, which ups the combat potential of your knights, your inner circle knights, your demigryphs, and your characters tremendously. It doesn't apply, however, to their mounts, which is something to think about, especially when it comes to the demigryphs. And then the final aspect for the Knights of the White Wolf is that your Grandmasters and Chapter Masters are getting a 5-up ward save against wounds suffered from a flaming attack, which is situational, but useful when you get it. So I think this is a great knightly order, and frankly my favorite. What are your thoughts, guys? Starting here with Andrew.
This one's cool, and again, I think you hit it on the head where being able to access the wolf hammers is like kind of the secret sauce. It's going to be a really good buff for like all your cav. Like realistically, if you're charging, you're probably going to go more than 3 because this is a cav based army. And it's a very good buff to demigryph knights. I'm sure they don't get the bonus to the mount themselves, but it makes those guys on top hit a lot harder. And even after like the first turn of charge, you're not relying on those lances. So, going back down to strength 1 or strength +1 is better than just having to switch to like a hand weapon or something if you're still in combat after. So like that's kind of a huge part of that. The ward save thing is kind of meh. Like the amount of flaming attacks in the game is almost non-existent. At least in our meta. So that's kind of, I don't know, a waste. And again, like the big downside I see is not a lot of anti-magic, so you're gonna have to sort of play around that, or just kind of accept that you're not gonna have any sort of counter magic when you play, and just think about that when you're building your army. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, so I generally agree. Like these guys are heavy on theme. They've got cool stuff. Furious Charge is amazing. Um, they're just and Ulrich, like Wolf Hammers plus the Ulrich um turn you get damage 2 on all your attacks. Suddenly these guys are, on the inner circle ones are actually able to like charge into a behemoth and reasonably kill it or win combat with it in a way that like, you know, uh questing knights or knights of the realm aren't going to
Yeah.
be able to. Absolutely.
Yeah, or Empire Knights before this Army Journal came out. This Arcane Journal came out, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
One thing also we didn't really touch on is, I'm just gonna bring it up right quick. The access to priests, like priests of Ulrich, have some pretty good buffs that they can also apply to the units, and this would. Let me just get Prayers of Ulrich here.
But at the same,
It's gonna.
but like at the same time, like everyone who doesn't explicitly say they can't take Priests of Ulrich is getting access to Priests of Ulrich in this army.
Sure, but I think like their not spells, but like their prayers really mesh well with stuff like the Wolf Hammer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like being locked into just being able to take wolves Priest of Ulrich isn't the worst, and like at least for me, I think that's the better priest than the Priest of Sigmar anyway. So a lot of
100%.
these knight units are going to be able to benefit from that.
Yeah, and you're 100% right, Andrew, on that one for sure.
Yeah, like the first one is you add +3 D3 to your charge roll, so that's going to make sure you get those wolf hammers off. You can re-roll any rolls to hit. Sorry, if a model attacks them, they got to re-roll
it's like the mark of
sixes.
it's like the mark of Nurgle, basically.
And the big one is the Wrath of Winter. So this model and any unit is joined gains multiple wounds D2 rule. Like that's huge.
It's
So all of a
massive.
sudden you're hitting with like these hammers that are already +2 strength, AP2, and then they're also doing 2 damage apiece. Like you're gonna tear down some pretty big monsters, and even dragons are gonna be like, well, do I really want to go deal with that shit? Probably not.
But my counterpoint to that is that you've been able to do that with knights this whole time.
Sure, but I think what changes in this one, Ryan, is that you're also pairing it with Furious Charge, right? So they come with Furious Charge, a better weapon, and then the potential to do multiple wounds too. So when you're doing multiple wounds too on double the attacks, it's just double as good as it was before when you could already do that type situation.
No, I guess what I'm saying is like I'm not double like Priest of Ulrich plus White Wolf work better, and that's great. But it's not because of the Priest of Ulrich, it's because of Furious Charge.
Yeah,
the benefits of the Priest of Ulrich haven't changed at all.
No, they haven't. But I'm going to agree with Andrew though that if I have to lose one of the two, like get rid of Sigmar, and I want to keep that Priest of Ulrich because he's a lot better.
Oh, that's heresy. You can't say shit like that, buddy.
Well, like I'm thinking of a White Wolves army, so that's not heresy for me. And I have Tutelage and Guard here, so I'm definitely on board with Ulrich. But like one thing though that I will say is, the priest is kind of your replaces your mages or your wizards as like your buff piece in the army. But, having played it once, the realization that I came to very quickly is a priest or a high priest of Ulrich is not a mage at all when it comes to reliability, because the way that prayers work is you roll basically on a straight leadership test, and a regular priest of Ulrich is a leadership 7. So you're basically only getting your buff off just over half the time there, and even on an 8, it's not as reliable as you might think. When you compare it to what most people run, which is like level 4s, which are obviously at a +4 to cast. So so that definitely changes things with regards to the math on how often that buff is getting procced. Okay.
That is fair.
Cool. So let's talk about the next knightly order, and that would be the Knights of the Blazing Sun. Ryan, over to you on this one.
I hate them so much.
Yeah.
Okay. The Order of the Blazing Sun allows you to take you can include 0 to 2 master mages as character choices per 1,000 points, and 0 to 1 great cannon or mortar as a special choice per 1,000 points. However, you cannot include any lectors of Sigmar or high priests of Ulrich. So you lose out on the lord level priests, and also still cannot take lord level wizards. But you gain level 1 or 2 wizards and cannons. But also you get, for 2 points a model, you get evasive and flaming attacks, which is a thing. And then in addition, your Grandmaster, Chapter Masters, and Inner Circle Knights get a +1 combat result bonus during a turn which they charge that is not cumulative. There's a slight wording problem here where they don't indicate what the bonus is not cumulative with. I assume it's with itself. It's not cumulative.
Yeah,
But
that
the
would
way
be
it's
my
written,
read, yeah.
it's not cumulative with anything. Like, it's a 5-word sentence. It's
Yeah.
terrible. But
Yeah.
yeah, so basically, like, you have no incentive to run a Blazing Sun character with Blazing Sun Inner Circle Knights because their 2 abilities cancel each other out. Which then means, I guess you want your Blazing Sun Battle Standard Bearer dude with your Demigryph Knights. You just have a billion combat res with a unit of Demigryph Knights, sure. But yeah, like, evasive, you want to be charging stuff and people shooting at you, and then you falling back in good order from being shot at just makes you further away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Because
seems counterintuitive to what this army wants to do.
Yep.
well, and like if evasive let you control where you go, that would be one thing.
Like you
Sure.
rush
Yeah, yeah.
forward.
Yeah. But it being a fallback in good order is a huge, like, problem,
For this army.
especially when you get into things like I've had people be like, "Oh, I trigger evasive, rolls boxcars, and their unit literally runs off the table."
Yep, I've done that.
Because they
Yep.
were too close to the back of the table. And then flaming attacks makes you great against trolls and worse against Knights of the White Wolf.
Or Chaos Dwarfs. Yeah.
Yeah, like, it's just it's a rule that hurts you more than it helps. It
Yeah.
also makes you bad at elves, makes you bad at fighting Sir Cecil Gaston, who gets a 3-up ward save against flaming attacks.
Fair. Yeah.
Like, they're just, but you get cannons, and like, that's the only thing that keeps bringing me back, is I'm like, okay, if I want knightly orders with 2 great cannons, maybe,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
sell it.
No, yeah, you can't sell it. I think this is the worst one, frankly, out of the 5, for sure. I think it kind of feels like basically a worse version of the Grand Army, and you're not getting much for that, right? So you could take some wizards, but you can't take level 4s. You could take a little bit of artillery, but probably not what you wanted to pack. So, and then you're getting some pretty crummy bonuses for your knights. So like, why are you taking this thing? Right? Just take Grand Army with another order in it. If that's like, if you really want to bring cannons and mages, and then you're probably you're certainly better off at that point. You totally stole my thunder on this one, Ryan. There, I was going to highlight a lot of the same points. Flaming attacks. I mean, it's really situational when having flaming attacks is a positive. I don't know if you're fighting like trees, trolls, or some few units in the Tomb King's book. That's basically it. Otherwise, it's a hindrance in a lot of cases. So there is that. And then, evasive. Like I thought for a long time about sort of like there must be some secret here that I'm not seeing with the evasive on the knights, but frankly, I don't think there is. Like it's just anti-synergistic to what your army's trying to do and what your whole game plan is. As you pointed out, running away, like running opposite direction from an enemy shooting at you, is literally the last thing you want to do with knights, because here's a surprise for you: next turn you're getting shot a second time instead of charging. So like you certainly don't want that, and then it can lead to some unintended consequences. So I think I think those rules are not great. And then the last thing is the +1 combat res bonus. I mean, +1 combat res is fantastic. Like I'll take it, sure, but if that's the only thing I'm getting out of this order, it's pretty rough. And then I mean, why not make it stack at that point? Like there's not much here, frankly. Just let it stack for if you bring, for some reason, 3 chapter masters, you could have a +3 to combat res, because a +3 or 4 or whatever is not breaking the bank. Like you've still got to win those combats, and you've still got to you've still got to play the rest of the game there. It's not just a straight combat res math thing. So I'm super down on Blazing Sun. I think it's not good at all, competitively or even from the theme they gave it. What are your thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, like I kind of agree with all that. The only thing, like the way I can see this maybe being beneficial, is if you're doing some kind of like wacky MSU with knights list, and then it's like not so bad if like, okay, like my small 5-man block of knights get shot, I'm going to use evasive, but then I'll have like 2 or 3 more around them to be able to still push that advantage, and you're just trying to preserve points that way. Especially with being able to dump a lot of like +1 combat res into some of these through the characters. Like maybe that's gonna let them perform a little bit better than a small unit should. And you compare that potentially, depending on what the outcome of the ruling here is, with like a war banner or like Ryan said, a BSB. So you can get a lot of static combat res out of a very small unit. Maybe then evasive's okay because you're still trying to preserve points that way, but that's kind of the only way I can see this being any way helpful.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's pretty bad. I mean, being able to access cannons, like that's sweet, but at what cost? You know?
Yeah, exactly. I guess, Andrew, maybe if you've got a shit ton of tiny knights units and the enemy shoots at you and then you pull evasive and you're somehow out of range, like if this is a really short range ballistic shooting weapon, then you can save points that way, because of course you can't redirect your shots like a charge, for instance. So I guess, but I think we're looking for ways to make this work now.
But you also have to kill stuff at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
And 4 knights is not gonna do that.
No, it's rough. Frankly, it's rough. But going from rough to something I think a lot better, I'll go back to you, Andrew, on the Knights of More.
Okay, the Knights of More, the emo edgelords of the Empire who deck themselves out in skulls and then head over to Slovenia to kill undead. If your army is based around Knights of More, they can take Wizard Lords and Master Mages as character choices. Amazing. However, you lose access to all the priests of Sigmar and the priests of Ulrich. They are also one of the more expensive nightly orders. So for characters, it's 15 points a pop, and then on just your regular duders, it's a +3. For being in part of the Knights of More, though, you gain hatred undead models, so Tomb Kings and Vampires. They have a 6-up ward save against non-magical attacks, which is pretty good. And then your Grandmasters, Chapter Masters, Inner Circle Knights all gain Fear and the Magical Attack special rule, which is pretty sweet. That's about it for them. They're pretty bare bones in terms of like buffs and stuff. But being able to access those level 4s, I think, is pretty huge for this army. And having like a base 6+ ward just helps them last a little bit longer. Like, sure, you're relying on 6s, and I always say if you're fishing for 6s, you're not playing the game right, but it's nice to have. And then just being able to have magic attacks on basically everything. Well, I guess just your characters, but and Inner Circle Knights, that's good against anything that goes ethereal. I know vampire counts like to bring Spirit Host sometimes, and then that stupid High Elf spell that makes a unit ethereal for a turn is really annoying, so it's nice to be able to at least still threaten those types of things. They're okay. I like them. Probably not as strong as the White Wolf, just because they don't get access to that cool weapon on everybody, but not the worst one either.
Yeah,
What
no,
do you
I
think, Ryan?
yeah, Ryan.
Yeah, so I like conceptually I like them. And like playing Bretonians, like getting a 6+ ward bails you like 99% of the time, bails you out more than you think it would. But at the same time, it's just kind of like, okay, cool, I got a 6+ ward. I do love the magical attacks and fear on the characters and stuff though, because sometimes it's nice to just like tool up your Grandmaster or whatever, and then just give them a great weapon and be better than a sword of might, basically, in most circumstances. So those sorts of things are cool, but yeah, like they're not bringing a ton of anything that's like to write home about, but they're cool and they're on theme, and you can. The big thing is you can slam some wizard lords in there and do cool things like give your knights frenzy and hatred everything, or whatever else you feel like doing.
Well, also just having anti-magic, like that's kind of the big thing. So you don't have to
Yes.
worry about like getting your ability to charge shut off, or getting your knights blasted away from a bunch of magic missiles that normally wouldn't be a threat.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yep, I think that's a good point, Andrew. You get your anti-magic game plan back for sure if you take these guys. I think not having any priests but replacing those with wizards is just a straight up win. And I guess this is the nightly order for I want to play nightly orders but also have wizards. Is the way I describe it right now. However, it feels a little bit like you're playing worse Bretonians because the ward doesn't become a 5-up when when you're faced with high strength attacks, and then you get wizards back. So you have a little bit of that. It sort of falls into that trap of being a little bit like Brett's for me on this one. And then the one other thing that we should mention when we're talking about the potentiality of bringing wizards in a nightly orders army is that there are some really good arcane magic items in this book for those wizards to take. So definitely it's a straight upgrade over the priests. They're also just much more reliable for the reasons I've mentioned before. Hatred Undead, I mean, it's good, especially in our meta that has a lot of Tomb Kings present. That would certainly come in handy for sure. And then the ward save I've already talked about. And then on your characters, having magical attacks and what's the other thing I'm blanking out right now?
Fear.
Yeah, exactly. Fear and magical attacks. I think that's like the best one, like all 5 knightly orders have a thing that they give their characters and inner circle knights, like an additional buff. I think out of the 5, this is probably the best one. So like magical attacks is just great, is way better than flaming attacks. You'll be thankful that you have it on a significant portion of your army when you run into the Green Knight or some of the other things that Andrew mentioned for sure. There's that, and then fear is good, but so it'll be really useful. It'll be extremely useful on the big block of inner circle knights. However, on the characters, it's a little bit meh because it doesn't. Fear doesn't confer to the rest of the unit if they don't have fear. So I guess you'll lose some value out of it. And then if you've just got one character that has fear, then you're not like your unit strength is not high enough for it to matter. So I mean that one's probably wasted a little bit, but it'll be great on your inner circle knights for when they start winning combats and stuff.
The
Yeah.
magic's also like a big fuck you to demon players.
Oh yeah, 100%. You're totally correct. Like, this is something that Danny doesn't want to run into for sure. Our local demon player doesn't want to run into for sure. Okay, so Knights of More are done. Ryan, let's go back to you for the last of our 5 knightly orders, the Knights of the Fiery Heart.
So the Knights of the Fiery Heart so they can include Flagellants as a rare choice, but cannot include any Ulrich stuff. Because Fiery Heart is the like Templars of the cult of Sigmar. So all that tracks. And they get for their 3 points a model here is their units can only be joined by a Grandmaster or Chapter Master of the Order of the Fiery Heart.
Sure.
Or a Lector or Priest of Sigmar. But the biggest thing is like that impacts Grand Army as more of a problem because in Grand Army you could slap like a wizard or something in there and get the spell from Oakenshield off and give people a ward save to your White Wolf dudes.
Yep.
And they gain Hatred Wizards and Orcs and Goblins. And they have the Slanesh Cult Elf rule of +1 initiative in the first round of any combat. And your character, your Grandmaster, your Chapter Master, and your Circle Knights may reroll any rolls to hit or to wound of natural 1 made during the combat phase. So I actually like these guys as kind of a nice middle of the road. Like rerolling 1s to hit and wound is very nice, and also makes weapons that trigger things like Killing Blow or whatnot a little more interesting down the road, without having to invest in something like a Paymaster's Coin to reroll all of your hits or whatever. The initiative bump is also kind of cool. And this is a unit that I more see as bringing as your cavalry in a Grand Army, or even bringing as cavalry in a in another army. But I also do kind of love the whole like general as Elector of Sigmar, brick of Flagellants. Just I love the theme of just screaming lunatics running it down the table. So that's a thing.
Sure. Andrew, what are your thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, like I don't like them as much as the Knights of More or the Wolf guys, but I think what Ryan said tracks in terms of like they're a good middle of the road. Again, they're up there with the expensive guys, so 15 points for your characters, 3 points a model for your regular guys, so it is kind of a choice you have to make. Theme wise though, definitely on point. Like this is how you make your Cult of Sigmar army. Just have like a bunch of crazy knights with their crazy peasant followers who are whipping each other. Hatred Wizards is neat, but very situational. And Orcs and Goblins, like being against Hatred Orcs and Goblins is also nice to have in the pocket, although I guess in our meta there's not as much orcs and
No.
goblins, but I do know they're like a fairly popular choice sort of outsider meta, so that might see more traction um, than maybe some of these other hatreds that were passed out in here. And then just having that +1 initiative, it's always nice to have, because even then, like if you're fighting um, other low initiative stuff, like you still might be able to pull off going first if it's a short charge. Or, if you are going up against elves with their high initiative and they're an 8+1, you might be able to even the odds or even go first against them, which, is always a big deal. Um, but yeah, not much to say about them. They don't wow me or anything, but, they have some cool stuff going on for them.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm wowed either, but I like them in general. I think there's a few things that are sneakily good with the Order of the Fiery Heart. So first thing is Flagellance. I think is unfortunate because it's kind of an anti-synergy with the rest of the army list. So you've got an oops all cavalry army list, and then a unit of unbreakable dudes, slowly lugging forward at the back, which is great, but just doesn't really help the army. And as Ryan said, is more of like a grand army thing for sure. That being said, moving on to the next one, the hatred. So hatred wizards is a bit like, what the hell for me, just because A, it's so situational, and then B, which wizard are you charging with a big block of knights or demigryphs or some characters that is not immediately dying in close combat to your knights? I guess the only thing that wouldn't die immediately would be like a massive monster, ridden wizard, riding a massive monster with some stacked saves. But at that point, your hatred is probably not going to help that much, anyways. So I think it just sort of falls flat as a bonus. And then orcs and goblins. I mean, yeah, it's cool. They are a pretty common army to see out there. But between the two other armies get hatred 3 armies of chaos, or hatred 2 undead armies versus 1 for orcs and goblins on this one. So it falls a little bit short for me there. In terms of the more positive things, though, for sure, the +1 initiative is actually sneaky really good. I think it's actually extremely helpful into, I was going to say mirror matches, but I don't mean mirror matches. I mean like matches into a similar archetype of list. So when you run into like Bretonians, or you run into the elves, high elves do a lot of cavalry type armies, for instance, having +1 initiative and counter charge on basically your whole army is going to is going to really pay a lot of dividends. If you can strike before the enemy, or at least in a simultaneous manner, you're going to save yourself a lot of grief, because you've got a lot of 1 wound models in this army. So yeah, I think this is actually really, really good into some specific matchups, though. It's not like it won't help you into, I don't know, dwarves and warriors of chaos that much, but it'll do great into other cavalry armies for sure. And then the last thing is with regards to the rerolls. Okay, Ryan, can you take over here for a sec?
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, with the as Kevin was saying, I think we've powered through all of the fiery heart options here. So Andrew, do we want to look at Harold Jemison?
Yes. Let me bring him up.
Here we go. I can rattle off things. Okay, there you go.
All right. So Harold Jemison is the Grandmaster of the Knight Panther. He's one of the 2 named characters in this book. Coming in at 185 points. He's a heavy cav named character. He's got a respectable weapon skill 7, plus a skill 3, which will never come into effect. Strength 4, toughness 4, 3 wounds, initiative 6, attacks 4, and leadership 9. So for 185 points already, that's a really good stat line. he is a Lord level character, so the 3 wounds make sense, but having 4 attacks with Strength 4 is great, especially when we look at his weapon in a few seconds. He comes with a hand weapon, which you'll never use. His magic weapon called Beast Reaver, very metal, and full plate armor. He does not have a shield, but his mount does have barding, and then it has hooves, which count as hand weapons. So he does have a 3-up save with the full plate and the barding, so, not bad. Then he has a basic paragraph of special rules. So he has counter charge, first charge, Grandmaster of the Knights Panther, which we'll go over in a second. He has hatred, Warriors of Chaos, Beastmen Brayherds, and Demonic Models, which is the shtick of the Knights Panther. He's immune to Psych, which is awesome. Magic Resistance 1, Master of Battle, which we'll talk about. Because he's a Empire character, he has Rallying Cry. He has Skilled Duelist, which we'll go over in a second. Stubborn, Swift Stride because he's mounted, and a Veteran. So he's got a lot of skills stacked on him, and again, you're getting good value because he is only 185 points for all that stuff. So being a Grandmaster of the Knights Panther, he can reroll a single die roll of a natural 1 when making a charge roll, which is their base thing. In addition, he can only join units that are Knights Panther. So if you do have any sort of mixed armies, or I guess just a regular army, and you take him, he can only go in units of other Knights Panther. Skilled Duelists. This is kind of a crazy one. So during a turn, should Herald slay an enemy in a challenge during a turn in which he charged, he may immediately issue a second challenge. If this challenge is accepted, it is fought immediately, meaning Herald, but not his mount, which is, doesn't matter, it's a horse. May fight 2 challenges during a single round of combat. That's a good way to stack a ton of combat res if you're bullying units that don't have other sort of fighty characters in them. And has 2 people who can accept, but there's a lot of cases where that can come up. And then Beast Reaver, which is his weapon. It's strength +1, AP 1, so not a huge amount of AP on that, which might hurt him. It does have Armor Bane 1 though, so hopefully you can get that 6 off and go up to AP 2. It has Killing Blow, which is good for all the challenges he's going to be wanting to challenge, and their magical attacks. Also, if he's fighting Beastmen Brayherds, he can reroll any failed wound rolls, which is pretty good overall, especially if he's in challenges. Like, he's probably going to be challenging out Beast Lords and Minotaur Lords, so being able to make sure that the attacks he does have actually connect and wound, that's going to be a big deal for him.
Yeah.
That's kind of the rundown of him. I really like this guy. You get a lot for not a lot of points. He doesn't really buff the units he joins that much, but just having a character with this caliber of, abilities and stuff really is nice to, plant him in a big block of like sort of inner circle knights or something and just have this big fuck you unit going around. And that double challenge thing is pretty sweet.
Yep, agreed. I think I'll jump in here, Ryan. I think you covered a lot of stuff there, Andrew. I think he's a good character overall, but like you mentioned, he doesn't really buff your army much. So there is that. He's a good fighter, but I think you're going to see him more in the in like the Grand Army. I just wish that he was in like a better knightly order. I think that you'd probably see more use out of him at that point. He's also the cool like anti-beastman character in that you're getting full rerolls to hit because of hatred, and then full rerolls to wound because of his weapon. So you like you're going to do some damage when you fight those poor beastmen with this guy. So that's just like fun and thematic for sure. Other than that, I mean, skilled duelist is a really cool rule, Andrew, as you pointed out. I just find it that it's a hard thing to sort of to build around, because like a lot has to happen for it to sort of come up. You know, you've got to get the charge off into a unit that has two challengeable characters in it, and then your opponent has to accept those challenges. So I mean, it's cool when it works, but it's not something that's like extremely dependable, I guess is my take on it. But for the points, if you were going to
My
run his
counter
order,
to that, my counter to that though is there's enough units out there that has like some sort of wording along the lines of any character or any model in this unit can accept challenges like a character.
Grail Knight.
sure, yeah,
Yeah,
Grail Knights,
Grail Knight.
Grail Knight.
yeah, Vampire Knights, yeah, Vampire Blood Knights are probably a more common example of a
I
good
think
unit challenges.
can't Warriors Chosen Knights also do that? Or maybe I'm thinking something else.
I'm not sure, but Blood Knights for sure can do that, and there's something you'd want to kill two of for sure.
Even like a block of fucking hammers can do that if the their lord is in there as well. Like there's enough situations where that can come up. And you know, using Bretonians as an example too, like they can take like their weird little fat priest guy as a second champion in that unit.
Sure.
Like so it will it won't come up every game, but like having that kind of in your pocket, or if there is sort of like a wizard bunkered in a unit, you can challenge a champion, kill him, and usually that's your tactic to protect that character in that unit.
Yep.
Now you can challenge that fucking wizard as well, and he's probably going to have to go to the back, which would shed any sort of buffs he might have given that unit off because he's no longer taking part in the combat.
Yep.
So there is situations where like that can be very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, Andrew, you got it at the end there. It's less of a case of, you know, if you kill 2 hammers out of 24, that's fun and great, but whatever, I guess. The real important thing with this guy is when you get into a unit that's carrying a wizard with it, being able to kill the champion that's protecting the wizard and then force the wizard to decline a challenge is probably the best bang for buck that you're going to get out of this character. But even then, I guess my point is, if you weren't going to take the Order of the Knights Panther, then you probably shouldn't take it just for this guy. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing looking at this is interesting is like, okay, so you are taking Knights Panther, whether on their own or in a Grand Army. I will give him a lot of points for this. At 185 points, he is better than any Grandmaster you can build for under 200 points. Because just a dude in full plate Knights Panther on a warhorse with the Sword of Might is 194 points.
Yeah. Yeah, fair. Yeah,
His big letdown is no ward save.
Yeah, his defensive profile is not ideal, I guess. And I'd love to take him on a demigriff. Sorry?
His defensive profile is offense.
Yeah, sure. It's challenges. I'm gonna challenge everything. You can't hit me. Yeah. Yeah, I guess so you're right. You're right there, Ryan. I wish you could take him on a demigriff. That would be sick. But yeah, no, it is what it is. It's a good beat stick in an army that doesn't have a lot of beat sticks. So there's that.
I will echo my continued point about named special characters, though, is they've knocked it out of the park in making them perfectly okay.
100%.
Across every Arcane Journal. Like he is good, but he is not, oh my god, I have to take this guy good. Which is kind of exactly where I want them to be.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think that is a big like hats off to the design studio. I think that's a big plus for the game in general, that you're not seeing every single game involving, I don't know, the Lady Elise and Galrock. Having those be, you know, sometimes useful, but generally not, is probably the space where we want them to be. Okay, let's move on to the Tutagen Guard. I think I can list off what these guys do. So Tutagen Guard, a really like an actual heavy infantry option in an army that doesn't really have any of those. Um, uh, so I think they're pretty good. What you're getting for 13 points of a model, which is pretty competitively priced, is movement 4, weapon skill, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 3, strength 3, but toughness 4, which is a real big one in the Empire list. 1 wound, initiative 3, so standard human stat lines there. 1 attack, leadership 8 unit. They come stock with full plate armor, which is great, as well as the wolf hammers that we've discussed at length earlier, which are just a really good weapon. Less good, I would say, on the Tutagen guards than they are on the cavalry, because you obviously won't get the charge that often with movement 4. That being said, they do have a few special rules that are also pretty interesting. So they have the Blessings of Ulrich, which is a 6-up ward against caused by an attack that flaming attacks, basically, which is useful, I guess, situationally, and so whatever. And then they have the Guardians of the Temple special rule here. It's listed as both an option as well as a rule that they have sort of automatically. So I guess that's like something that needs to be factored. It's just an error. Frankly, you should be paying 1 point for this rule. So what it will give you is that when you're engaged in combat, you can basically re-roll to hit rolls of 1, which is just good, just straight up good. So yeah, I guess my take on these guys is overall, I think they're a really solid infantry unit in an army that doesn't really have any solid infantry units. The biggest problem, though, is that they don't run well with the Knights of the White Wolf army, because you've got essentially a full cavalry army, and then you're going to end up with 1 or 2 or whatever blocks of Tutagen Guard sort of lingering behind that won't make it into combat for a while, and which really are just reducing the number of knights you're bringing to the table. So it's really unfortunate, but I don't see them being played much aside from for like theme reasons in the Knightly Order Army of Infamy. That being said, they probably have a lot more play in the Grand Army, where you can also take them if you take a Priest of Ulrich, basically. And in there, I mean, if you were going to take infantry, aside from like Cortax, this is probably the best infantry available to Empire. So there is that, and I think they'll do perfectly well standing in front of your war machines or protecting some other squishy bits of your army in the Grand Army, which you obviously won't have in the Army of Infamy. But that's enough for me on this one. Ryan, what are your thoughts on the Tutagen Guard?
So, I love the concept, but at the same time, I'm just gonna be super aggressive here. But at the same time, if Empire Great Swords are bad for 11 points a model, and Bretonnian Foot Knights with great weapons are bad for 13 points a model, and Chaos Warriors are bad for whatever the fuck they cost, Tutagen Guard for 13 points a model aren't magically going to be better than those other things that are priced better and have comparable stat lines, defensive profiles, offensive profiles. They are supremely okay, but elite heavy infantry in this game is not good.
Yeah, so I agree with you, but I will say for similar point, it depends on how your army is built, right? So for a similar amount of points, you get Black Orcs, or you get, in my personal army, Infernal Guard, which I think still have their uses. You just can't build a list around them, right?
But that's what I'm getting at, though. Is in the army you have to play this unit in.
Yeah.
It doesn't add anything that's not done better by 4 other things. It's better than great swords, but great swords are already bad. But I for the same number of points, I could take a shit ton of veteran halberdiers and have basically the same effect on the table.
Yeah, sure. I guess the only way I'd like, if you're bringing these guys as a hammer unit, you're not doing it right, and you're going to be disappointed by them. I think I would use them in the same way that I use like Infernal Guard in my own army, which is, to a bit of an anvil to hold the line, and then something to defend your squishier bits in your army. So all the artillery park that you're bringing along as an Empire player. I mean, the combination of being a 4-up save with toughness 4, stubborn, and veteran is not like, it's a good defensive profile. So if you find you can probably find a use case for them as a defensive block, but that's about it. Other than that, like, certainly not in the Army of Infamy. Andrew, what are your thoughts on Tutelage and Guard?
I think you guys covered it. Like, they're bad in their army of infamy, but I think they're a good choice to take in just the regular Grand Army. Let me just look at something right quick. Aren't they slightly more than great swords?
They're 2 points a model more than great swords, 3 points a model more if you give them the Guardians of the Temple rule.
But great swords are bad because of their weapon choice. And do not these guys have the wolf hammers?
Yes, the fact that they fight at initiative is good, but they're fighting at initiative at strength 4, AP minus 1, 99% of the time.
But I like great swords are bad because of the great swords on them.
Well,
So
I
this
think
kind of-
great swords are bad because they get charged and then they die to anything that hits them because it hits them first, and they have a pretty bad, defensive profile. At least these guys will survive a punch a lot better than great swords will. So if you
But,
were
like,
trying
how
to hold
many-
the, yeah, go ahead.
But like, how many of them are going to be in your fighting rank to matter? Like, it's the same problem with Chaos Knights. Like, to make a unit, or not Chaos Knights, Warriors of Chaos, like, to make a unit of them that's big enough to be relevant, you're spending so many points when you could have just brought more knights, more cannons, more anything except this unit.
Again, I think it depends a little bit on your sort of army construction. I guess I think they would be a better option for core in the Grand Army, but they're obviously not core there, so you kind of lose out. And I would agree with you, Ryan. Yeah. I would agree with you that you're probably going to want to take something else if they're not like a core tax, because they're a better tax than what's available in for the Grand Army for sure, if that were the case. I guess I agree with you on that point. I guess just in a vacuum, they can take a punch and survive, at least because of stubborn, and be able to be there for multiple rounds of combat. So there is that. But it's going to be difficult to find a place for them, I guess.
I mean, don't get me wrong.
We can all agree on that.
Yeah, like, they're super cool. It's just they don't in any way fix the problems that above 10 point per model heavy infantry has in the game, like, writ large, outside of a handful of armies where, that is the core of the army, like dwarves, chaos dwarves, etc.
Yeah.
But, like, they kind of fall into the same hole for me as, like, Warriors of Chaos, where they look like they're good, but then you try to use them and they just don't work.
Yeah, no, I guess thinking about this as we're talking here, Ryan, in my army, like, Infernal Guard are fine because they're a core option, and I have to take them. And I'd rather those guys, which are survivable, than most other infantry in the game. But, if I flip this on the reverse, I would never take Infernal Guard as a special choice, right? So I guess that's the problem you're going to run into with Tutelage and Guard in the Grand Army, and it's even worse in the Army of Infamy because they have zero use there.
And, like, in the Grand Army too, like, now they're competing for points with your Inner Circle Knights that you want to take.
Exactly. Demigryphs, inner circle, artillery, all that kind of stuff. Yep. Yeah, you're right. So thematic choice, but you're probably not going to see them in game. If you could take like a priest of all, well, we've beaten this horse to death now. I'm going to stop. But yeah, it's unfortunate. Okay, so that's so those are the 2 unit entries. Let's talk about actually before we move to magic items, let's talk about the list. Now that we've read through the whole list in detail, do you guys think you could play knightly orders at a tournament and do reasonably well from a competitive perspective? Starting with Ryan.
I think so, yes. Like, you're not horribly dissimilar in terms of what you can bring to, like, vanilla, like, Grand Army Bretonians, which still does well. And you have different interesting tools. The biggest thing that I see as a difference between, like, the very winningy kind of Bretonian lists that you see that are the most similar to this, or like some oops all cav chaos things, is that your tooled up grandmaster or chapter master is straight up worse than a duke.
Yeah.
And like
significantly worse, like by a huge margin.
And it's not Knights of the Realm that are winning games for Bretonians. It's dukes on Pegasuses and cannons.
Yeah. I guess it would be yeah, I guess you're bang on there. Yeah, Andrew, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I think I would struggle with this army in a tournament, mainly because it doesn't fit my playstyle. And if I was to run a Knight's Order army, I'd probably be going more just because magic plays into a big part of my playstyle, and I'd want that access in this army as well, but I'm not sure if the other buffs that Knights more get is enough to help me sort of push out wins. I guess I would have to test it out myself, but I think there are ways for other players to win with Knight's Order army, and I think it is a good alternate way to play Empire. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
How would I word this? It's like I would also struggle playing with Empire again because it doesn't suit my playstyle, and I don't think like this list would make that any better or worse. It kind of seems like a good alternative to sort of the Grand Army, not stronger, not weaker, just kind of different.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I think it's a little bit weaker on the overall. Well, it's certainly weaker on the overall than the Grand Army is because you're losing a lot of tools, and you can still use the knightly orders in your Grand Army. They just all have to be of the same like knightly order. So, yeah, definitely it's a step down from there, but I think that's common throughout all of the arcane journals that we've looked at. Regardless of that, however, I mentioned it in my comments earlier. I think the knightly orders do have some play competitively, and you can certainly go to a GT and leave with a winning record with the knightly orders army of infamy. I think you're probably if you do want to do well with this army, you're probably going to go to Knights of the White Wolf, stack some magic resist on there through the items that we're going to cover shortly, and then just go for an always be charging, max aggression list with 3 or 4 different hammer units that can really pack a punch because of the weapons they're carrying and because of like Ulrich buffs and Furious Charge. That's like the first option. You can also do, I think, decently well with more, but like the only advantage or the biggest advantage more has is you've also got wizards, but then you may as well just play Grand Army, I think. But I think you could do it with more. And then the last one is probably, I would say, Fiery Heart, just because it will set you up pretty well into some of the common matchups that you may face. I think those are like your most competitive options out of the 3. Knights Panthers probably not far behind, and then the poor old Blazing Sun Knights are bit of a basket case as far as the nightly orders go. So I think there's play competitively. I think a good player will be able to do well with them. You can certainly win RTTs wherever you are with this army, and as I said, you could do well with this army in a bigger event too. But you're certainly not on the level of Bretonian Exiles or on the level of Mortuary Cults here. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
Mortuary cults will just eat you. But no, like I think it's really cool. But at the end of the day, it's one of those armies where the like skill expression required to do well with it is going to be higher because you're playing the game with fewer tools.
Yeah.
Those tools are very specific, but it's just one of those like good players will be able to do well with it, but I don't think like anyone will be able to pick it up and replicate that sort of success because it's like playing a lot of cavalry stuff. It's rough. Like it's a precision activity where you really need to like figure out how to pick apart enemy units and like isolate them and then destroy them. It's not just like we love to say always be charging in those things, but if you just like smash cavalry into front of enemy army, it goes poorly.
Yeah, I think that's usually a factor of those models are very expensive and it turns into a bit of a glass hammer type army. So if you just start charging willy nilly, you're probably gonna lose. Yeah.
Exactly. And one of the big things that Moore has going for it is that the like force multiplier that is magic really helps smooth out some of those like I charged into a rectangle and bounced off the front of it problems.
Yeah, sure. I think nobody will disagree with you on that one. Doubling your attacks because of Furious Charge and potentially going
Also
multiple
smooth
wounds
that out.
too will also work, right?
100%. I mean, that's why Pegasus Knights are great. So
Yeah. So yeah, I think we're all in agreement with regards to which ones of these nightly orders, at least the top 2 or 3 looks like for sure. Okay, so there's play here. If you're interested in this army list at home, like I think there's some play here. Okay, so let's move on to magic items, which is the last segment of our show tonight. So we're just gonna obviously, because it would make no sense because we haven't covered this army yet, we're gonna leave out the non-specific items, but we're gonna talk about the rest now. So I'm gonna kick this off with the Hammer of Righteousness. So the Hammer of Righteousness is a 50-point magic weapon that gives you Strength +2, AP2, magical attacks. Obviously, requires 2 hands and strike last. So basically, very similar to a great weapon. However, models hit by the Hammer of Righteousness must make a leadership test for each hit suffered. If the test is failed, the hit wounds automatically and no armor save is allowed. Regen and ward saves can be taken as normal. And then if the test is passed, you still roll to wound and you make armor saves as normal. So I actually don't hate this weapon. I think it's interesting just being able to wound automatically. And having no armor saves as a bonus is really good. It's basically like better poison if you look at it that way. And then there's like some fun interactions. For instance, if you put this on somebody with Spectral Doppelganger, for instance, you could force your enemy to take something silly like 7 or 8 leadership tests and just greatly delay the game. But that fun case aside, I don't hate it as an expensive magic weapon, and there's not a lot of expensive magic weapons that are worth it aside from the Ogre Blade, basically, and a few other corner cases in some other armies. But yeah, that's my thoughts. What about you on this one, Andrew?
I kind of like it, but I think in an Empire army, strikes last really lets it down. Um, because of how squishy Empire characters are, the chances of you being able to swing back might not exist. If this was just like magical attacks requires 2 hands, it would be fucking amazing. because there's enough, like, unless you're fighting, Lord level characters, this is gonna be able to make sure you win challenges. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of like I have mixed feelings on this one. Like I like it in theory, and if I was able to take it, say in my Dark Elves, I'd be like probably taking this every time, because the Strength +2 and AP2 is very solid. But yeah, that strikes last on Empire characters is just kind of makes me
Yeah.
not want to take it.
Yeah, I you've got a good point there. I mean, your Grandmaster, if he charges into a Chaos Dragon, for instance, and has Strike Last, is probably never going to make it to the point where he can strike. But into most other targets, aside from your like most souped up combat characters, you're probably still going to get to go. I mean, like a Grandmaster is a like a middle of the road combat character, but he's still not like terrible, you know. And then the only other counterpoint is going back to Spectral Doppelganger, because that one's cast at initiative and uses the profile of the weapon. Like the strike last aspect wouldn't really impact it.
It does impact it. It uses all of the special rules of the weapon. So you just can't, like, if that's the weapon you're gonna use with Doppelganger, you
Yeah.
can't cast it until initiative 1, or until the
Okay.
initiative you would be able to use the weapon.
Okay. All right. So I stand
Yeah.
corrected on that one, but still, the Grandmaster is not going to die to a stiff breeze still. But you are right, Andrew, that like a dragon will run him over probably. Okay, Ryan, over to you.
Yeah, it's the same boat. Like, this is not a weapon for fighting dragons. This is a weapon for fighting like goblins. um, because at the end of the day, too, like as you said, your initiative, you're not gonna fight him in time, and then you're also like, you go after someone's general, they're gonna be leadership 8, 9, 10. They're not gonna fail those leadership
Yeah, yeah.
checks. So it's at that point it's just a super expensive great weapon. Um, so it's cool. Like I love it for theme points. There might be some interesting choices on like a fiery heart Grandmaster, where you're coming in and at like you're coming basically back all the way back up to initiative 4 on the charge or counter charge.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
Yeah, fair. So cool. Certainly not an auto take from us. All right, moving on to the next one. Pearl Daggers, back at you, Ryan, for this one.
Yes. So one, I am 99% sure that this is a wink and a nod to General Patton, but
Okay. How so?
it's a pair of pearl-handled weapons.
Oh, sure. Okay.
It's very clearly meant on like the Nuln side as well. But anyway, it's it's a strength user, AP -1, extra attacks D3, magical attacks, requires 2 hands. Reroll failed to hit during combat. It's very similar to a common magical weapon that just doesn't get the reroll to hit.
Yeah.
It costs 35 points. The only thing I would ever consider taking this on is the like new flagellant character that came out that like can't take any form of defensive profile anyway. But he could also just spend 4 points and have a flail. So
Sure.
I don't know what I would ever use this for, but it's cool.
Yeah. I guess for me, I wouldn't recommend taking this one, frankly. It kind of falls down because it's strength user, and this army has some pretty terrible strength characteristics across the board. So in the best of cases, you're hitting at strength 4, which is not ideal. Like if we were, for something else, I was looking at Demon Princes today. If you're doing strength 6, strength user, extra attacks D3, like now you're cooking. But at strength 3 or 4, it's not great, frankly. And for 35 points, I don't think it's worth it. So yeah, this one's a pass for me. What about you? Andrew?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Like, the strength of it is what lets it down. And like maybe you can make some weird gimmick where you take like a potion of strength too, but then you're just throwing good points after bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very situational. Like sure, I guess if you're playing other Empire or Goblins or something, it won't matter, or like it'd be a little bit better, but I
Sure.
don't know, not great for 35 points.
Yeah. If you're gonna take this plus a potion of strength, like just take an ogre blade. You're good. It's gonna be the same cost at that point, basically. Close
Yeah,
to.
for sure.
Okay, so back at you, Andrew, for the blade of silvered steel.
Yeah, so this one's 30 points. It's strength plus 1, AP 1, gives you hatred, undead, and magical attacks. On top of that, if you are. You can only be taken by knightly order armies of infamy. And if you're fighting undead models, they cannot make armor or regeneration saves against wounds caused by this weapon. I dig it because it's a 5 point more sword of might with a good fuck you to undead, which they deserve. Being able to remove that regeneration is huge against undead, so it's really nice to have. And if you aren't fighting undead characters, it's still, just a slightly more costed sword of might, which is never bad to take if you've already used up your ogre blade on someone else. So I don't hate it. I think it's pointed appropriately for what it does. Yeah, I'd probably take that if I had the points.
Sure, Ryan. What are your thoughts?
I also like it. I think it's a nice piece to throw on like a champion for a unit of inner circle knights or something like that. But it's one of those like, if I have 30 points, I will throw this in, but I'm not going to like go out of my way to get it. That's all.
Sure. Yeah, for me, I'm not super hot on it just because. So, firstly, hatred undead, like you'd lose that aspect of the rule if you're taking Knights of More because you're already going to have that. And then, like, no armor or regen saves against, two armies in the game for 30 points. It seems awfully situational for something that's so expensive. If it was 15 points or 10 points as like a cool insurance policy against, you're facing undead. But I think for the price and the situationalness of it, I'm not, I'm not
But
super
if
sold on
if it was pointed like that, then it'd be just a strictly better sword of might. Like a sword of might is strength plus 1, AP 1, magical
it. Yeah.
attacks for
Wh- wh-
25 points.
Which is cool.
So
Like, I'm fine with this army having a better
20
sword of
points.
might. Yeah.
20 points, okay. So like 10 points more for an ability that's situational. Like it's not if you're gonna buy sword of might and you have 10 points left over, why not just buy this? And I think Sword of Might is common enough, like on your hero level characters or whatnot. Like even in my Dark Elf list, my uh, general has a Sword of Might just because I've given him a bunch of defensive armor and talismans. So I didn't have enough points for an Ogre Blade on him, but like this was good enough to get him up to Strength 5, AP 1. And then having that extra, anti undead stuff on top, I think is worth it.
Sure.
I
Okay.
don't think it's as bad as you guys think it is what I'm saying.
It's
I
not
said
bad.
I
Like,
wouldn't go out of my way. That's
yeah,
all.
No,
it's
for sure.
it's just
It's not.
situational.
Yeah, 100%. It's situational, sure.
Yeah, so we're gonna skip the next one because that's a null-related one, but it is definitely a good item when we get to it next episode. But moving on to magical armor now, we're gonna start with the Shield of the Gorgon with Ryan.
Sweet. Gorgon shield. Okay, the Shield of the Gorgon costs 40 points. It's a shield that can only be taken by a Knightly Order Army of Infamy model. And while in base contact with the bearer, enemy models suffer a -1 modifier to their attack's characteristics to a minimum of 1. For 40 Okay, so the models that can take this are predominantly on 30 mil bases, with the exception of someone on a demigriff. Because I don't think that there's any way that you can put this on a wizard on a hippogriff. I guess you could put it on Elector of Sigmar on the War Altar, but like the frontage is so narrow that you're gonna reduce the number of attacks from like 2 models, which for 40 points is just not worth it to me.
Can't you put it on a Imperial Griffin?
No. So all of the Grandmasters and the Chapter Masters can only be on Barded Horse, Pegasus, or Demigriff.
Ah, brutal. Okay. Well, stand me corrected.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah, I think it's Ryan. You're like hitting on the nail right on the head here. It seems like a good bonus when you read in a vacuum -1 to attacks, but it's to a minimum of 1, and then it's for models in base contact and not for the unit that you're in combat with. So that's where it really falls short for me. As you mentioned, you're not going to be touching a lot of models, and then I think even beyond that, there's not a lot of units being played in the game right now that have 2 attacks base. It tends to be 1 attack as the vast majority of what you'll see, and then lords, characters, and big gribblies have many attacks and not just 1, like 2 or whatever, or 2 or 3, where it would be a noticeable decrease to their output. So for 40 points, yeah, I'm definitely not seeing it. So what are your thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, like it's very situational. I guess if you have like a challenge character or you're fighting other lords, it might be okay. But there's probably better ways to spend 40 points if you're trying to build a character around that gimmick. So I don't know. It's not great.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, yeah. Anyways, so let's park this one. Andrew, can you go over the twice blessed armor?
Yeah, for 25 points, you get a suit of full plate armor. Um, in addition, you can cast Hammerhand from the Lore of Battle as a bounce spell of power level 2. It's kind of neat. I mean, full plate armor is always nice to have. Hammerhand, it's it's a cool gimmick to have, I guess, in combat. I can see this on even just like a shitty unit champ who's going to be challenging, and then right off the bat you're going Hammerhand and getting a bunch of hits. But like again, it's a bounce spell level 2, so like what are the chances you just don't get straight up dispelled? Um, it's yeah, I don't know. If you're going for that gimmick, sure, it's okay, but other than that, like might as well just buy full plate armor at like 4 points or whatever it costs for regularly. Um, it's not amazing. It could be fun to play with though. It's kind of my feelings on it.
Ryan, for you?
Yeah, so I actually really like this, but I actually wouldn't take it on anything that already has access to full plate generally. This is something I would slap on like a Priest of Ulrich or a Priest of Sigmar, or even in the Nuln list on an Empire Engineer Battle Standard Bearer, so that you get heavy armor, or you get plate armor on something that normally couldn't get plate armor. But where I think the fun play is as well is if you have Hammerhand at initiative, it also frees you up to do something like take a great weapon or some other strikes last thing, because you're still getting, what is it, 2d6 attacks from Hammerhand at your initiative, and then you could still hit more later, assuming you killed the stuff that would otherwise kill you on the way in.
I actually have Hammerhand up here now, so it casts on a 7, so not bad on a bound level 2. You get 2d3 strength 4 hits with AP 2.
There you go. So 2d3 pretty okay hits. The other thing I think Kevin and I joked about this at one point is you're throwing it on like your inner circle unit champion, so that when you fight wolves of the sea and they challenge you, you're just like, fuck you, Hammerhand.
Yeah.
That'd be
Super
funny.
edge, but fun case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also really like this item. It's not too expensive. You're getting full plate. I would agree with you, Ryan, that I wouldn't take it on anything that could already get full plate. Like your Grandmaster, there's other items that he wants to take for 25 points, but certainly for your priests of Sigmar or Ulrich, I think this is a good item. Those characters are going to be pretty important to buff your output in the Knightly Orders Army of Infamy specifically, and then they can't access full plate normally. And then, of course, with Hammerhand, you could just buff their output because they're probably going to be at the front rank of a unit in order to buff it. And then there's of course, the fun, as you mentioned, challenge piece for Wolves of the Sea. So overall, I'm definitely down for the twice blessed armor. It's a good thing. Moving on from
I do have one other comment before we move on that I'd forgotten is I really appreciate, and we will see it in other items later, but I really appreciate bound spells that are not magic missiles showing up. I wish it had
100%.
happened earlier. But I love the idea of bound support spells.
Yeah, you're right. This is like super cool design space. And, if you start to throw in, like just piling on what you're saying there, Ryan, if you start to throw in multiple items that give you support spells, then you can just sort of patch the issue of not having wizards, at least a little bit, by just giving you access to some of these other tools. The Ring of Tal that we'll cover later is another great example. But overall, I like 100%. You're onto something here. It's really interesting and fun design space. And then moving from strength to strength, what I think is an absolutely fantastic item that you will certainly need in your knights in your order your Knightly Orders Army of Infamy, the Witch Hunter's Ward. This is an extremely common magic item, so you could take as many as you want, and they are 20 points. The Witch Hunter's Ward gives you magic resist 2 to the model, which confers to their unit, of course, and then once per game, you get the added benefit of re-rolling a single failed armor save for that character that is carrying the item. I think this is a really good item. My first sort of read on this was to immediately slap them on every hammer unit I could in my list of Knights of the White Wolf, because obviously we've covered it at length. Magic is going to be the weakness of that Army of Infamy, and then just having easy access to Magic Resist 2 across all the units that you had wanted on is I think extremely helpful in that context. It's basically like the Brazen Collar for Chaos. Then the single failed armor save is a cool added bonus, whatever. Originally, I was thinking to take 2 of these for Magic Resist 4 on all items, but actually reading more into it and thinking about it, that wouldn't work because Magic Resistance does not stack. And the reason why I was sort of led astray there is because it works for the, what's it called? The Obsidian, what's the main rulebook item that you can stack that is like a specific case?
Lodestone.
Yeah, the Obsidian Lodestone. So that one is like, it's not a magic resist thing. It's a specific to that item, which is not the case for this one. So you're maxed out at magic resist 2, but that is still incredibly useful in an army where you don't have wizards most of the time. What are your guys' thoughts on this one, Andrew?
I mean, its biggest strength is that it's a common magic item, so you can just kind of pepper this around your army, as well as its points cost, so that will fit nicely on unit champions who usually have, a 25 point magic item allowance. So it's a good way to get at least some anti-magic into these Knightly Order lists who might not have wizards to be able to do that, and at least protect them a bit from, any sort of hexes or magic missiles and stuff like that. So I actually really dig this, and I think you will see lists with this kind of just peppered all over the army to make sure that you're stacking magic resistance everywhere.
Yep. And you've still got space to take other stuff after that you might want, Andrew, because Inner Circle Knights and Demigryphs, which are most of the army points wise when you're talking about knightly orders. The unit champions on both those types of units have like an allotment of 50 points, so you'll also have some room to take other stuff and pepper out some magic resist throughout. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
Oh no, it's a great item. Like there's no downside. It's
I
just cool.
I wish I had this in my army. Basically, is the takeaway.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay, Ryan. What about the Slayer's Hourglass?
So for 10 points, enemy models whose troop type is monster suffer -1 to their weapon skill while in base contact with the bearer of the Slayer's Hourglass. So this goes back to the discussion we were having earlier. If you have 10 points and 10 points in your magic allotment and nothing else to do with it, why not? Like it's got some interesting play in that like White Wolf Inner Circle Priest of Ulrich unit, where you just want to go like murder giant chaos spawn, things like that.
Yeah, with their already terrible weapon skill, but yes.
But like it's priced perfectly. Like it's just
Yeah.
okay, it's 10 points.
You're
10
right.
like 10 to 15 points is the part of the army I always run into where I'm like, well, what do I do with this?
Yeah,
So
you're right.
it's a perfect item for that.
Yeah, 100%. Like for me, it's I've got 10 points left. And it's an interesting bonus. What I will say is, a lot of really hard hitting combat characters in this game. So think your Black Orc war bosses, think your Chaos Lords, etc. are weapon skill 7. And unfortunately for him, the Grandmaster is only weapon skill 6. So, if you've got 10 points left on your Grandmaster and you slap this guy on him, basically that means you're bringing your opponent, like if you're fighting another big nasty thing, down to weapon skill 6. So then you're both hitting on 4s. So that will pay some dividends there for 10 points, but it's situational and it's okay, but it's just 10 points, so take it if you've got 10 points left. Basically is my take also. So similar to you there, Ryan. What about you, Andrew?
I don't know. I think it's kind of useless. Like you kind of hit the nail on the head of like where this is actually useful is bringing weapon skill 7 stuff down to weapon skill 6, so it's the same, but I don't know.
Yeah, don't go out of
I
your way
guess
to take this, but yeah.
yeah. Would that even apply to like a Black Orc War Boss on a
It would.
or like a Wyvern? Because wouldn't
Yeah,
it
yeah.
only affect the Wyvern?
No, it says it's the unit type becomes monster and
The whole
behemoth
unit
is the
type changes?
subtype. So
Okay.
yeah.
So that is, I guess, a decent way to sort of bring everyone down to your level. And, hitting on 4s as opposed to 3s is a big jump. I
Yeah.
know it doesn't sound like a lot, but, when you only have a handful of attacks to begin with, potentially
Yeah.
changing that sort of break point is pretty big. But,
I mean, you can
yeah,
hit giants on 2s.
Yay.
okay. So,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Like
guess
anyone had a problem.
Andrew, you were right there with your example. Like the Wyvern is probably the best case scenario in the Black Orc that you run into with this item, because if it's a Chaos Lord, sure, he's going to be down to 6s and hitting you on 4s, but his
yeah.
Strength 7 Dragon is going to D6 stomps is going to flatten your Grandmaster regardless. So yeah, you probably want a smaller monster like a Wyvern.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to some of the banners here. Let's start with the banner of the Knights Panther. Andrew.
Yeah. Banner of the Knights Panther. It is 80 points. Only. Ooh, I didn't see that. Okay, it can only be taken by a Battle Standard Bearer, which I guess makes sense because it's 80 points. And they have to be part of the Order of the Knights Panther. A unit carrying the banner of the Knights Panther gains the Unbreakable special rule. Now, That's a really good rule to get, but I don't know if 80 points is worth getting it.
Oh,
I get
just wait. It gets worse.
I guess if you're making like a big Death Star of Demigryph Knights, that might be a good use for it, but I don't know. I don't think that's
No.
really
Yeah,
worth
man,
it.
a big Death Star of Demigryph Knights is winning its combats. So, yeah, not for 80
Yeah,
points.
that's fair. Yeah, like if it was like 65 points, I'd say yeah, but 80 is just that's a big chunk of change to put on this just to gain Unbreakable.
Yep, and with a lot of limitations. But I won't steal Ryan's thunder here. Like, what's your thoughts?
Okay, so first off, the problem is that the battle standard bearer is a unit already. Characters are a type of unit. You Models that are unbreakable cannot join units that are not unbreakable. So, your battle standard bearer gets the banner, becomes unbreakable, and is now unable to join any unit in your army.
Fun.
Okay, but that I think is a rules as written versus rules as intent thing.
Yeah,
100%. But at the end of
100%.
the day, like it's it's the same problem with the Griffin Panner discussion and everything else is okay, cool, they intended that, but we can't just like wish that the text of the rules didn't say what it says.
Yeah, you're right.
All right,
Although,
fine.
although Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong. You could hang out on the side of a unit of flagellants.
They have loner.
They have fuck. You can't even. All
And,
right, terrible.
sorry, they don't have loner. They have a special rule that says only things with fanatical zeal can join them.
Okay. So they're nothing. Okay, it's even fair. I was
Yes.
mostly going in jest there, but even that doesn't work. So fine.
But yes, at the end of the day, no one is going to pay 80 points to make a unit of knights unbreakable because you could just have more knights and win combat.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. There's too many stipulations on this. A, it's extremely expensive. B, like it can only be your BSB, which is again problematic because your BSB needs to be mounted, and anything that's mounted is usually not taken in a like a massive, enormous unit size where you're going to be fighting multiple rounds of the same combat. Like you're going to be powering through different enemies that you charge, so you're not going to need Unbreakable. And if you get charged by something that destroys you, that like has enough output to kill your mounted units, then you're not going to have enough models left for it to really matter regardless. Even
And
if he
just
could
slam,
join, even if he could join.
just attach him to your unit of Tutagen card.
Sure, but they don't have Unbreakable, right? So like you
No.
can't.
But like, assuming it works,
Yeah.
like on the assumption that it works, that's the thing that I would attach him to.
Which brings me to the next stipulation, which is that it must be in the order of Knights Panther only, right? Like my
Yeah, so you
first
can't
thought
even join.
before, yeah, exactly. My first thought before reading any of this and understanding
Yep.
it was like Tutagen Guard, like 30 of them with Unbreakable would be a fucking nightmare to get through, but you can't. Like you must be again in the order of the Knights Panther, so that's like another stipulation. It's just terrible. Like we could keep going on, but no. Like make this a 50-point item so it can be taken by other units, and don't lock it to the Knights Panther, and maybe we could talk, and certainly
like,
don't link it to a BSB. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's like Bretonian 50 points. You can make a Baron, Duke, or Paladin unbreakable. But then it also expressly says they can't join a unit. But then like you just have a dude on a Royal Pegasus that flies around and is unbreakable, a giant asshole. But it's 50 points, not
Sure.
80.
Yeah.
It's definitely priced assuming it's benefiting a unit.
Yeah. Yeah. Just okay. Let's just move on from this thing. It's pretty bad. The other banners are slightly better though. So Next up is the Tapestry of Sigmar's Triumph, a 40 points item. This banner, so a unit carrying the Tapestry may reroll any rolls to wound of a natural 1 during the first round of combat. So I don't hate this. I think it's pretty decent. It pairs well with Inner Circle Knights, obviously, which like innately get reroll ones to hit. So rerolling ones to hit and to wound is just good value, especially if you're investing a lot of points into one of those units. And especially because you're going to be high strength, so typically strength 6, because you've either got a hammer, or more likely a lance, which will make you strength 6. So you're going to be wounding on a pretty low roll. So the ones are going to matter a lot when you actually get to reroll those. So yeah, I think it's a decent item. It's just a 40 points price tag in what is already a very pricey army because it's all knights is maybe hard to fit at times, but like in a vacuum, I like it. Let's go to Andrew. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think it's a little overcosted for what it does. It's nice that it's not like a one-use type thing, which a lot of these types of abilities seem to be tied to you.
Yeah.
It seems like it's very situational, and if it was like as flat like rerolls to wound as opposed to just natural ones, I think it would be pointed a little bit better because you still like say your weapon skill. Oh, I don't hit on 2s, then this thing's useless. So I don't
No,
know.
it's
Like
to wound, not to hit. Yeah.
well, no, sorry, like a 2 wound
Oh yeah.
as opposed to like if you roll anything but a 1 and you still don't wound, like it doesn't get any benefit. Um, so like what are the you might reroll like one die of combat, maybe 2. It's kind of overpointed, I think, for what that does. If it was like all failed to wound rolls, I think it'd be a little bit better.
It would be an auto take. If it was reroll all failed wounds, it would be everybody would take it in every single list for sure.
Yeah, but then you just bump up the points a bit. Like I think for this ability, it's overcosted. And yeah, I
Sure.
don't think it's worth the points. Just it would it's like a negligible difference in a combat, I think.
Okay, Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Weirdly, the unit that springs to my mind that I would take this on is actually not even because this is not locked to the knightly armies. It would actually
Yep.
be either on like halberdiers or greatswords, or even two guard. But like something where you just have like kind of like a mass of like meh, but somewhat high strength attacks. But I wouldn't put a 40-point banner that only has this effect on a like expensive but kind of delicate to keep alive unit of knights. I would put it on something that's mostly winning combat by static combat res and just wants some extra oomph.
Sure. I guess so. I agree with you. I wouldn't put it on a unit like 5 or 6 knights or whatever. But if you're building a massive brick of Inner Circle Knights, 12, 13 or whatever, you're stacking all the buffs on them. Maybe you're in more. You've got them like in demonology with a bunch of buffs. Like just then having an extra little bit of re-rolling some attacks is decent, but like yeah, it's marginal.
Or,
It's marginal. Yeah.
or you could just be Fiery Heart and get this ability every round of combat. Um,
Yeah, but then you've got to
and
be Fiery Heart.
which is not terrible.
No, wait,
Like
yeah,
it's not White Wolf, but it's better than like Panther.
or Blazing Heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's all right. It's aggressively all right. I think the next one we may like a little bit more though. I think Ryan, why don't you do the Icon of More?
It gives you fear for 25 points. And if you already have fear, you gain terror. So if you want to have demigriffs that cause terror,
Yeah.
go nuts. Or if you're I guess the other advantage here is if you're playing Knights of More, your Inner Circle Knight unit that you slap this banner in now also causes terror instead of fear. terror coming from either cavalry or demigryphs in like a relatively large unit is actually kind of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like chaos. I think the Sea Raiders crest from Wolves of the Sea does the same thing. It's handy.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's not as much fear in Wolves of the Sea as you can potentially get in this army with demigryphs and then all of the Knights of Moor. But yeah.
No, and like I also would do silly things. Like again, you stick this in a giant block of infantry, and now people trying to charge you are mildly concerned about how many models you have.
Yeah. Fair. Yeah. Yeah, because fear on a single entity is garbage, but on a lot of unit strength is not as bad. So yeah, I think for me the obvious case, the obvious use case on this one, which I think is definitely worth it, is the Demigryph Knights. You take four Demigryph Knights and you give them this 25-point banner on what's probably a 300-point unit, and suddenly they have terror. With couple that with fast move, you can declare a lot of long range charges, so you're proccing a lot of terror tests. I think there's value there for sure. Again, it's a really elite points dense army, so you may not always find the space, but I do like it again in a vacuum. Andrew.
Yeah, I think it's good just to force those terror checks, and on such like a cheap icon or banner, it's really good. Also, like if you are, say, a big block of demigryphs, and you win combat, like terror also confers a -1 to leadership when doing your break test. So,
Yep.
that's a nice way to fuck with your opponent's leadership on that stuff. Like for 25 points, I think this is great if you're putting it on a unit that already causes fear, so you get that jump to terror. Otherwise, like I don't see a use for it in something that doesn't already have fear.
You're right.
Like Ryan's edge case, I think is interesting to look at, but at the same time, if you're putting it on like a big block of state troops, are you really going to be worried about being outnumbered after that combat's getting resolved? Because they're probably mostly going to be dead.
Probably losing combat. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
just don't take state troops.
So in the Nuln army, it gets interesting because of the way, like, because you're forced to take a regiment, and we'll talk about that next
Oh, we
week.
can't
Like,
talk about that.
but like the interaction of regiment and detachment and things like fear and immune to psychology and stubborn and whatnot gives you some really interesting options that are unique to that army because you are compelled to use that structure.
Fair.
Okay.
Fair.
Well,
25 points. Sure. Okay, let's but you're right. Let's move on to the next one. So I think this is where we get to probably some of the spicier items, at least some of them ones I like a lot. Let's start with the Ring of Fortune. Over to Andrew for this one.
Yeah, so the Ring of Fortune is 20 points. It's a single-use item that allows you to reroll any failed to wound rolls made during the combat phase. I like this, and immediately my thoughts go to a wizard with the Dragon Slaying Sword and a Spectral Doppelganger. Because it's just any 2 wound rolls made during the combat phase, so it's not just close combat attacks, it's whatever he's doing. Other than that, like, I guess it's okay for 20 points on like just sort of a more bog standard like fighty character. Just having that sort of assurance that you're gonna win a combat once per game, or at least do some more damage than you normally would expect. I think it's nice to have, and I think it's costed appropriate for this ability because it is fairly powerful. And it's a lot better than sort of the aforementioned reroll ones to wound. This is everything.
Yep, agreed. Ryan.
Yeah, so I think the same. Like it's decent for 20 points. I didn't go the wizard route. I was more of the monster hunting grandmaster. Like you put the dragon slaying sword on a dude on a Pegasus and give him a paymaster's coin in this ring, and you just have the like go turn of trying to kill the big scary thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be my edge case also, Ryan, or like the fun thought experiment that we had when we were chatting the other day. There is like, you're probably going to hit with three attacks on your Grandmaster. So, you've got one turn out of two, you're probably going to hit that 6 for Monster Slayer. But if you're re-rolling them and you get 6 shots at it, then you hopefully, all dice being equal, will come up with a much more reliable Monster Slayer. I still don't think the best way to outfit your Grandmaster is Monster Slaying Sword and a Ring of Fortune. But I mean, if you're gonna go that route, at least it's an option there to make it a lot more reliable. And I mean, it's something to think about, and it's why I tried it in that list I was running for fun, because like dragons are going to be an issue for the nightly orders for sure. So maybe it gives you a bit of a tool into those. So yeah, I guess we got that one covered. Which brings us to a really fun item. Over to you, Ryan, for the Ring of Tal.
So the Ring of Tal is also 20 points. It's single use, and it allows you to cast Oaken Shield as a level 3 bound spell. Oaken Shield gives you a 5-up ward.
Yep.
I don't know if it remains in play or if it's just for the turn.
It's just for the turn.
Yeah. So basically you and your whole unit have a full, your next start turn, so a full game round of a 5-up ward. So it's cool. Like it's the thing you slap on the unit that you either need to make it somewhere to do something or that you just want to hammer out on stuff. And again, because I'm horribly just infantry brained, I keep thinking of silly things like this would actually, like, I don't need to invest in a wizard to protect my unit of spearmen. But it's also really cool on like a big unit of inner circle knights or something.
Sure. I think so. I agree with you, and I guess as we're reading through these, like one of my realizations there, Ryan, is that a lot of those items stack really well with a big, massive bus of like inner circle knights, and I get the feeling that you're sort of being pushed by these items into doing that. Like, the big downside to inner circle knights obviously is that they're 1 wound. So if you have this item on your priest that's accompanying them to give them some buffs, and that big turn where you're going to fight something nasty on the other side, you pop 5-up ward on the whole unit, and then whatever other buffs you've got going, like that could really help dial things up for you. Because realistically, I know that single use sort of scares people off a little bit, but it was my original issue with the item. But like when you start to think this through, your unit is not in like a life or death combat every single turn of the game. So you can probably happens, 2 max 3 turns in the game. But if you can help swing one of those with a big ward save, it can be really helpful, I think, on that big bus archetype, but not worth it on some of the smaller units for sure. What are your thoughts on this one there, Andrew?
I think it's very excuse me, very situational. I think it's pointed fairly appropriately for what it does, and it's very interesting to see that they went with a power level 3 bound spell. I think that's the only case of it outside of the Anvil of Doom, if I'm not
Cascade
mistaken.
of Souls, right, is also 3.
Yep, and my bound fireball arcane
Flame Strike
the
Wand.
flame strike wand. Yeah.
Okay, so like what?
A few items, a handful. Yeah.
Yeah, a handful. So like usually it's 2.
Yeah.
Is kind of the cases I've seen most places. So it's cool that it got that little buff in power. I think you guys nailed sort of its use cases though on the head. Like it's that one turn of assurance that you're gonna be okay in maybe a combat you might not have wanted to be in to begin with. And a 5-up ward is like really strong, and it's a way to sort of protect like your key Death Star unit, or your unit with
Yep.
like your big fighty characters in it. Like, I think it's good. I don't think it's like an auto take though, but if you do have
No.
20 points kicking around, it is like a nice little piece of assurance to have.
Yeah, and as you were sort of hinting at there, Andrew, it fits well with most of the army, which is naturally on a 3+ save at least, or on a 3-up save most of the time. So that will do well. 3-up, 5-up on a big brick is solid. Okay, now let's move to the arcane items, and I think there are some interesting ones here for sure. Andrew, why don't you kick us off with the twin-tailed wand?
Yeah. So it's a 40-point arcane item. Once per turn, the bearer of the twin-tailed wand may attempt to cast one of their spells a second time. However, should they miscast a spell, the bearer is overwhelmed by the winds of magic, and instead of rolling on the miscast table, suffers D3 wounds with no armor or regeneration saves allowed. Ward saves can be attempted as normal. This is potentially very strong, although it's also very dangerous to use. Because it's not if they miscast one of the spells they're casting twice, it's just if they miscast a spell. So that's the whole game, whether you're casting 2 or not. You can potentially just auto nuke your wizard with D3 wounds. That being said, I like it. I like the risk involved with it. I think it's pointed fairly for this because, being able to cast one of those power spells twice in a turn is pretty crazy. Immediately, my thought goes to Pillar of Fire, and dumping 2 of those out per turn is ridiculous.
No, when you recast a Pillar of Fire, it automatically deletes the previous one, so that wouldn't work.
Right, but if it's like this spell, it's just like, cool, here's a second
Oh yeah,
one.
sure. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Even like being able to going back to my last thing of let's put the dragon slaying sword and doppelganger on a crazy wizard on like a Pegasus. All of a sudden
Double
you're getting
doppelganger.
Yeah.
double doppelganger, which is insane.
Put that wizard on a
I'm-
griffin so he doesn't get auto nuked.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's a lot of ways that this can be strong, but it can also just eat your wizard on that first turn miscast on your first casting attempt, right? Like I think it's cool. I think it's pointed fairly, but it is a very like you need to really think if you want to cast magic with this guy because he could just die.
Yep. Ryan.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like it's very cool. At the same time, like I've miscast enough that I'm not a huge fan of just like auto losing my wizard to stuff. But since you can put him on a Pegasus or a Griffin that are going to give him more than 3 wounds, is kind of where I would take him.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, being able to effectively cast 5 spells a turn with your level 4 wizard is just great.
Yeah, when I first looked at this item, I was in love with the possibilities of just breaking stuff with it. However, there's like some downsides. Andrew, you highlighted the most significant one, which is all miscasts are affected by this. I originally thought it was only on the double casting, or let's say you cast Fireball twice, it was the fireballs that were affected. The fact that it affects all your spells, like, yikes, that one is that's super problematic. My other problem with it is it prevents you from taking the lore familiar, which allows you to pick the spells that you'd really want to double cast. Like Knightly Orders will, I think, struggle into big dragons or other ridden mounts. What would really help with that is double casting, what's it called? Word of Pain from Dark Magic. So reducing the toughness by 2 of that dragon. Suddenly a T4 dragon, strength 4 T4 dragon, certainly isn't that big of a deal anymore for your whatever 16 strength 6 AP -2 attacks that you're getting from that big block of Knights of the White Wolf on the charge. So I would have definitely wanted to use that for that kind of situation. Unfortunately, or double casting something like Demonic Vigor Vessel. I always forget which one's the better one out of the two there, but double casting Demonic Vessel would be freaking amazing. But the problem is no lore familiar. You can't guarantee that, and then the kill yourself with the miscast is also pretty rough to swallow. But overall, I really like the design space of this kind of wacky item that sort of breaks the rules and allows you to do creative and fun things. Speaking of being creative and fun, I like the next one too, the Tome of Midnight. So the Tome of Midnight allows the bearer to apply a +1 modifier to any of their casting rolls when attempting to cast spells from the lore of demonology, dark magic, or necromancy. In addition, they know an extra spell chosen in the normal way than is normal for their their level of wizardry. However, the bearer can only cast the number of spells that they would normally, as per all these similar type of magic items out there, and then is subject to the loner special rule. So there's quite a few limitations here. That being said, I generally like it. I think you could do some fun things like thematic things in the Knights of More, for instance, with like a necromancy or demonic or dark magic caster that's effectively casting as a level 5. You probably won't, so you probably wouldn't take demonology in that case, but the other ones would surely apply, and you'd put him like on a Pegasus or some other similar mount, have him running around. So I think it's a decent item. +5 to cast is no joke. So yeah, I like it as an option, and I like the design space. Because I mean, 30 points is the cost that it takes to increase by 1 power level. So going from 3 to 4, for instance. So yeah, I think it's a nice option for those who want it. What do you guys think? Over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, I think just the +1 to cast is already worth the 30 points alone. Not including knowing one more spell.
Yeah.
Loner isn't a big deal if you're gonna put this guy on, say, like a Pegasus for mobility anyway. And demonology isn't the worst for a lone character. There's some good utility spells in there, and the magic missile isn't bad to have.
No, you're right,
and
but I think mainly you want Demonic Vessel to buff that big unit of Inner Circle Knights, but you can't be in the unit now because you're loner. So that was what I was getting at.
And realistically, do you want to be in the unit anyway? Because you're still sitting at the front. It's still a very dangerous place to be, even with Demonic Vessel. And Demonic Vigor is actually pretty good, because
Yep.
it does like buff your movement and your initiative. So it's making sure when you do send that bus of knights in, they're going to be hitting first, regardless of what they're fighting. And that little extra pip of movement is pretty huge. So I think it's actually like super good on like a lone caster. Dark magic I don't think very highly of, and to be honest, necromancy, other than the few times it's been used against me, I don't know.
Yeah, I
How
mean,
much?
necromancy, you'd have some fun interplay with, again, Knights of More, because you could use reduce the enemy leadership on a few of the spells in necromancy, couples well with fear that you get on a lot of the units and more. So there is that.
I mean, demonology has the good -2 leadership
Yep, it
one
does.
as well.
-2 initiative and leadership. Yeah.
Yes, but I think it's great for what it is. Just the +1 to cast is already huge. Like +1 to any sort of magic is always like a huge break point in the game. It's why you don't see any level 3s, but always level 4s. It's just because the +1 is such a big deal. So yeah, I think it's really good. And 30 points, like that's dirt cheap.
Yep. Ryan?
So I really like this. Like I also like that it's kind of bounded to the not super amazing lores of magic. Like it's not battle or illusion or anything. But also, in fun fact, the wizard's staff, also from the Empire magic item list, has an asterisk. So if you want to cast the summoning at +6, you can.
Let's go.
Yeah, no, you can for 65 for a total of 85 points, you can make a wizard that dispels at level 5 and casts assailments and magic missiles as a level 6 and casts everything else as a level 5 from demonology.
Decent.
So yeah, you
Probably
can do
one of the better wizards out there.
but like you slap that on, say, a hippogriff and on an imperial griffin, sorry, and now like demonic vessel, yeah, you can't get it on another unit, but your imperial griffin's strength is +1, whatever. Demonic vigor, by the way, has a range of 15 inches. It's just demonic vessel that
Yeah,
he needs to be in
tracking.
the unit for. So, but also like getting yourself up to like a +5, +6 also makes necromancy a little more viable, because the problem I always have with necromancy is their casting values are very high just across the entire discipline. So like deathly
It's almost
cabal.
like it's intended for users that are writing a Mortis engine.
Pretty well. Now
Yeah,
the downside is like loner makes deathly cabal basically useless.
sure.
Unquiet spirits is dumb. Spiritual vortex is a thing.
Yeah.
Curse of years, not okay, cool. Yeah, like it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I can cast necromancy spells now, but they all suck.
Yeah. So you probably want demonology,
Demonology.
frankly.
Yeah, it's probably going to be demonology. Um, but yeah, there's some interesting mishmashing with things like the wizard staff. If you really just want to like run around, casting the summoning on people and doing
Yeah. With the
a
best
whole bunch.
demonology caster, basically, bar none.
Yes, fuck chaos. Just
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Empire is the master of demons.
Yeah. You could get to +6 in Warriors of Chaos, but for significantly more investment.
Yeah.
Okay, so last item, Crystal Ball. Ryan, back at you for this one.
Yes, so for 20 points, once per turn, you can make your opponent re-roll a single roll to hit or to wound roll made against a friendly character model that's in command range of the bearer of this crystal ball.
Wow.
If like if I had 20 points and had already bought the Icon of More and the Slayer's Hourglass and had nothing else to do with my wizard's points, sure. But like,
but then you'd have 50 points that you could use somewhere else, right?
don't question my logic. No, that's my point. Is it's like it's one of those things where like it sounds like a neat idea, and again, if you really want to lay into theme and be like, this wizard is like the secret bodyguard to my general, and just blah 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 blah. Yeah, you can do some stuff, but yeah, making people re-roll a single hit, like the biggest time I can see it being useful is like, oh no, I'm gonna get killing blowed. Re-roll that 1/6 that you got. But
Why is your wizard in combat with something that has killing blow? Or why is it in combat in
no,
general? You know, like,
but the wizard doesn't need to be in combat. The wizard
yeah.
just needs
Yeah.
to be within its leadership
Oh, sure,
distance
sure,
of
sure.
something else.
Sure.
But yeah, I would never take this.
Yeah, command range, you're right. Yeah, it's bad. Don't take this. I'm gonna stop there. Not very good. Andrew?
No. That's a waste of points.
Yeah. I mean, there's way better stuff you could take in this book for, like, take the magic resist 2 item for 20 points. That's extremely common, like the Witch Hunter's Ward or whatever it's called, over this any day of the week.
Like I would take the hourglass before I
Yeah,
would take this.
and have 10 points left over. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Take an extra night, like whatever. Just don't take this thing. Okay, cool. So we're done with all our items now, and we're done reviewing the Army of Infamy in its entirety. So yeah, let's wrap this one up. It was a pleasure for me to be here with you guys tonight. So our next episode will obviously be the city-state of Nuln. I think Ryan especially is looking forward to that one. So yeah, that was it. That was it on my part. Anything you guys want to touch on your way out there, Ryan?
Yeah, no. So like I know we kind of teased about a lot of stuff during this, but I really, really like this the Nightly Orders army list.
Yeah.
I just think it is very heavy on theme, and that there's multiple different ways to play this game, and that we look at it from kind of one of them. But that I think there's a, like, even that Blazing Sun army, like, you could do something really cool. Are you gonna win a tournament? No, but who gives a shit? It's cool.
Sure.
I mean, it's knights with cannon, so
yeah,
there's something there.
Just take the Grand Army. But yeah. Okay. Andrew, what are you anything you want to hit on the way out?
Yeah, I think this is really cool and thematic, and this is 100% what Heralds of Darkness should have been. A lot of limitations to what you can take in the list, but with a bunch of different buffs and things unlocked. If they did this with the Chaos list and say instead of orders it was marks, I think it would have been a lot better. This is how you do a very limiting army, but also still give it its own flavor and a bit ability to play the game. So yeah, I think it's really cool. I don't know if it's the strongest way to play Empire, but it's like theme wise, it's amazing.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I think I'm just happy it exists. We got like 5 different armies for the price of one, essentially. It's cool design space. It moves the Empire into a realm where it could have a credible combat army, I think, which is just good for Empire players out there. So yeah, I'm super happy with it. I'm looking forward to reviewing Null, and yeah, that's about it. I guess this will be weird if you don't listen to the episode in a time frame close to where we are now. But happy holidays and Merry Christmas for everybody out there listening into this. It's been a pleasure.